front of me and set on its side.
All right, the financial report, you're just going to cover that.
Okay, so I think you're the only one that
I didn't print it out. No, I've got it on my computer, but
I always heard that it's the most crooked.
okay. Let's go ahead and get started. And we've had a problem today in that the iPads, they're apparently having some trouble loading those. So you've got some paper information in front of you, and then I trust everybody had a chance to look at the information that was furnished to you by email earlier in the week. But anyway, we'll go ahead and call the meeting of the Executive Committee to order. And I guess the first item on our agenda is review of the fiscal year 18 year-to-date financial results. And we should have all gotten those by email. I know I had a chance to look at it, but Wendy will let you present that and make any comments you would like to make.
Okay, Casey, I apologize. I did go around to everybody, and it sounds like most folks had printed out the information already. So I think they have access to it.
Okay.
Without the iPads.
Okay.
So I'll start from there. But if anybody has questions, or we can have to pass on something because we need to go print something, we'll have to do that.
What is this under? I'm sorry.
We're on Executive Committee first.
Executive Committee.
Yeah. Okay, so for the year-to-date financial results, the first page in your document is the net position statement. And as you'll see on there, our revenue so far this year for the fiscal year 18 is $901,000. Expenses, that includes our Edison expenses along with our cost-backs, is currently at $575,000. So we currently are sitting with a surplus of $326,000. We, of course, have already realized most of our revenue for this year. So I would, just for round numbers, expect maybe another $60,000 in licensing revenue, and then we may have some in case and complaint as well for the rest of the fiscal year. But we're pretty close to our revenue numbers for the year. So the next page kind of outlines our Edison expenses in more detail, and these are the items that we budget for each year. And I'll just highlight a few things, and then you all can ask me questions if you have questions. Our gross revenue, or the net revenue after the regulatory fee, is down slightly, but we did expect that because those inactive folks that are 65 and older did not renew, so we did expect a decrease there. So I'm comfortable with where we are. Salaries and benefits, this is trending higher, and especially in employee benefits. We are fully staffed this year at this point, which we were not last year. We went several months without an investigator. So that increase is to be expected to some degree. With regards to the employee benefits, I dug into that a little bit deeper because we're up sharply there. It appears to be related to health insurance and retirement. So when folks make different elections for health insurance, that changes that expense line item. So that's where those.
On that one, I was just curious. I mean, salaries went up by $7,000. We went up $30,000 on the benefits.
I pointed that out to the accounting manager and said, I'm having trouble finding this or where it is, but I will say that some of the staff had changed their health insurance elections, that in some cases doubled. If you may have had single, but you went to family coverage.
You cover 100% of family?
No. Well, the board does have to, you have to take what the employee pays plus the state. Yeah, the board has to cover it. Yeah.
So if you're single, we don't do just single coverage. We do family coverage if you have a family.
Right. So you could do, which is under the state program.
Yeah.
Right. So you can elect to be single coverage. You could elect no coverage. So, if you had a spouse that covered it, then you could elect no coverage. So I think the difference in our staff now I saw a lot of differences there in health insurance for sure. And then retirement, we did bring Sherry on, but she was under the old retirement system, which is different than it is now, and there's a little bit more money involved there with what is contributed to the pension. So, Yeah, so those were the two specific areas, and he wasn't able to find anything more than I found in those line items. In longevity compensation, we are unfavorable to budget, but we have realized likely all of our expense there. All the employees eligible for longevity have received that this year, so we should be done there. That includes longevity plus any bonuses that are paid out at the beginning of each calendar year. Travel, we're on track with travel. I will say that we still have to, these are as of February, so we still have the Executive Directors Conference has to hit. The regional meetings occur in early June, so we will likely see that travel expense. So we have quite a bit more travel that we will see hit there. I think for the most part, employee training appears to be low there, but we still have all of the NASBA registration fees fall there. So we have the ED conference as well as the regional meetings that still have to hit for that line item as well. So we're obviously sitting in a good position. If we bring in our average revenue for the next couple of months, we're still looking at probably at least $75,000 surplus. So, and Carter and Bill Huddleston are going to come down in just a little bit to talk to us a little bit about the change in legal assessment, when this board might want to consider fee reductions, and those types of things. I believe that was asked about at the last meeting. I think that covers kind of the specifics on the financial information I thought you might want to be aware of. Does anyone have any questions?
Anybody have any questions? If not, I guess we need to go ahead and get a motion to approve the report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion second. And I guess it's only the committee members that need to vote. So all on the committee, in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Second item on the agenda is travel information. And again, I think we were all furnished with that. Not a lot there, but would you any comments you would like to make on that?
This is for the third quarter of the fiscal year, so January through March. So this does include travel for Sherry and I to the Executive Directors Conference, and then just some minor other travel expenses are listed there.
Hey, any questions on the travel report? We don't need to approve that, I don't think. That's just informational. The next item was discuss opportunities to lower fees. We'll wait on Carter and Bill to get here to do that. You had some information in your package to do with peer review and the new benchmarks there, and
That actually is TSCPA was going to come discuss just briefly some of the changes. I don't see that they're here yet, so we can talk about the last item if you want to.
Okay, and that is the failed peer review reports guidance that I guess is a document prepared by the one of the committees at NASBA. So you want to talk about that, Wendy?
Sure. So the I have the wrong thing in front of me. Okay. The failed reports guidance. So this is a document that was prepared by the Compliance Assurance Committee. I want to say it was 2013, 2014 time period. But the reason I'm bringing this to you is because we are going to start receiving peer review reports at the end of this month. And I'd like the board to look at what are we going to do with those when we get them. Are we just going to file them? Or is there an expectation that we want to look closely at them, and is there at any point we would take action on any of them? So this document is something the Compliance Assurance Committee created to give a best practices for what to do in those events. The document I gave you highlights what you would do if it was the firm's initial peer review and they received a pass with deficiencies or a fail report. And generally, without reading it to you, it indicates that you send them a letter notifying them that you're aware of it, you're going to monitor their corrective actions, and you expect them to receive a pass on the next peer review. And you, in fact, file that and keep up with their follow-up or their corrective actions. So you don't necessarily take any action, unless, of course, the board saw something they felt was egregious to some extent and wanted to take action. Obviously, they could. The second, number 2 in the document refers to a consecutive report that is less than a pass report. So you've already had one pass with deficiencies or fail, and now you're on your second. And so basically, if you've gone from a fail to a pass with deficiencies, then you've made some improvement. So that's kind of the borderline of where the board has difficulty. Well, they've made improvements. Do we just continue to monitor them and their corrective actions, or should we do anything from an enforcement standpoint? So those are kind of going to have to be maybe at the board's decision or staff's decision, or a PROC, which we can talk about a little bit later. If you received a pass with deficiencies and now you've received a fail, the likelihood is that there's some real concerns there, and maybe you do want to turn it over to enforcement, open a complaint, and take a look at what's going on. The last section refers to you've had two. Am I on the concept? I'm sorry. The number 2 that I was just talking about was a consecutive review after a pass. Sorry, you had a pass. Now you have a pass with deficiency or fail, which is there's a lot of monitoring going on with that one, which is similar to the first one. The 3 is really what I just talked about. You're having a consecutive bad peer review report, and what you would do in that situation. And then the last one is a consecutive review after a review with a fail. So you had a fail, and now you've got a pass with deficiencies or fail again. And so in most cases, that would you'd monitor, or you'd take a look at that. If it's a fail and a fail, you're likely going to send it to enforcement. If it's getting better, that's where you have to consider. But you've already had 2, so.
At some point, they'll get kicked out of the peer review
Right. So
program, right?
Correct. And I apologize, but this is something I added to the back of the document that you did not receive in your email. Kara had provided me with some report acceptance body guidance on what they are doing. And so they have basically guidance on what to do for firms that fail to improve on their peer review. And that is similar to what I just talked about in that document. So the peer review committee, if they fail to receive a pass rating on their next peer review, the RAB and ultimately the administering entity must assess whether this is deemed to be non-cooperation by the firm, and should they turn them over for a hearing to be terminated from the program for not complying. And then, of course, we would find out, at that point if they were terminated. The termination process just takes a while because there's a hearing involved.
Still 3, right?
Well, they have changed that
They have,
recently, Trey. So after they receive one bad peer review, they get a warning letter that says your next one needs to be better, or we may turn you over for a hearing. So they've reduced it. You're right. It used to be that it wasn't even considered until you were basically on your third one. Right. And so now they've, at the request of regulators and the acknowledgement of what the program is about, they have bumped that up quite a bit. So
how quickly now do we know about a substandard review? I mean,
right.
We haven't. This board has not known. And so that's kind of the issue.
I'm talking about the new rules, right?
We would be notified if they got terminated from the peer review program, right?
Right.
Because at that point,
Which is 6 years?
you can't do a test work in Tennessee
It's about
if you're not enrolled.
6 years, yeah.
Jeez.
But now we're going to be receiving the peer review reports. So we can do something if we want to. But I just wanted to bring this to your...
We need to be careful about that, and Brad just walked in, or whoever wants to talk. Kara, do you do that? Who does the peer review stuff? Katie, okay. I mean, my point is if we did anything, we would be kind of usurping the process that the society has, right?
Right. I think since they've moved up their process, maybe we don't look at it till someone's terminated
Right.
for not improving their quality.
At that point, it's like, what could we possibly do? I mean, other than revoke their license, I guess, but I don't know if you're going to do, if they can't do a test work, then they're out of the process completely.
True.
Right?
True.
So it's something short of 9 years now before,
Yes.
but we don't know what that,
It would be 6 years, because if you got
6 years.
you'd have to have 2 deficient peer reviews.
So
Plus
ba-
9.
but yeah, it's
Yeah,
better.
we're trending in the right way. Huh?
Yeah, not yet trending the right way.
But I mean, that's a pretty intensive. When you pass with deficiency or fail, you've got to have a letter of response. You've got to agree to do certain things.
Right.
And so the process is set up in such a way that you're trying to help them get better, or making them take responsibility and get better. And you got to wait to that next one to see if they actually did. So I don't know how you can go below 6
you really can't.
without kicking them out if they get a fail.
Right.
Unless you had a peer review.
But you can request an accelerated peer review.
1 year. 1 year.
You have to have enough time to be reviewed.
Right.
Is the only stipulation.
That's right.
So I'm not sure that I'm asking for any action today. I'm just thinking that for you all to think about it and what direction might we want to take, if anything. Or maybe I report on how many, we've had, it appears that we have 15 pass with deficiencies and 4 fails this year.
I would like to see the stats.
See the
Because I think
stats.
they're getting worse. They should be,
Yeah.
considering the process change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking, Wendy, that if we're getting the reports, we ought to have a reason for getting them. We ought to do something with them, and we ought to at least look at them to see if they're passed or passed with the deficiencies or fails. But I think I would like to see, how many fall into each category, so we kind of know what
feel like
the
we've
lay of the
gotten that in
land
the
is, what it
past.
looks like.
I feel like we have gotten those stats.
So typically, annually, TSCPA will come and give you kind of an overview of those and give you those stats.
You can get them more real time, I guess. if each board member.
And that would typically be what she would talk to us about today, Kara, but they didn't pull that whole report because they've had some changes in their platform, and all of the data wasn't available to produce that
One
standard
question I
report.
do have, we're having a formal hearing tomorrow, and I don't know what it relates to, but if it involved in a test engagement, in the past when we've brought those hearings, or when we've had the hearings, have we had access, I can't remember if we've had access, it's been so long since we've had one, to the peer review of those?
Probably not, because we haven't been able to use that in a disciplinary situation.
Okay.
So, but now we would be able to ask for that information.
You're saying before we could not?
Correct.
Okay.
Before the legislation changed in 2016. So before that, the board didn't have the option to know the results or ask the firm. The firms weren't obligated to provide that to the board.
I just want to make sure legal and investigator know that if that's an option now, when they're investigating, that needs to be brought in as part of the evidence being presented.
So Casey, to your point, we could develop some sort of standard letter that goes out just letting them know that we're aware that they've received a pass with deficiencies or fail, and that we're going to monitor their corrective actions to make sure they're complying with those. Something of that nature.
I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other on that. I do think we ought to, if we get the reports, at least review them and file them and get some idea of how many are passed with deficiencies and how many will fail. But other members of the committee may feel like it would be beneficial to write a letter, but that process is going on already.
I mean, they're dealing with it through the
Yeah.
TSCPA or the AICPA, one of the two, and so
I'm not sure I want to add additional work or on us.
but I guess if we got a fail or a pass with deficiencies, does that go in the file? The firm file?
I think we have to talk about that. We can.
Is that that's public record, right?
Right. I think we have to talk about that probably internally with legal about whether we actually pull them off of the Facilitated State Board Act, the portal, and put them in the file, because you're right, or we just leave them there and only pull them if we're using them in a case of sorts.
That would be, I mean, my point is, I think if this board starts looking at every one of these reports, I don't know how you avoid at that point not putting it in their file as being
Well,
part of the official records of that particular firm.
I don't think this document is suggesting that the board look at them. They're suggesting that a proc look at them.
Okay.
Or, I'm not sure if we can have the investigator look at them to that degree. We are kind of still in limbo about a proc, about, whether we can pull one together or whether we're kind of waiting to see what NASBA might be able to do or provide as a resource to.
I have a hard time getting a proc together.
Yeah.
It kind of suggests here in this letter, it says the following discussion, when it is suggested that the board take action, it says it's intended to mean the board, its staff, or another group designated by the board. And it seems like we already have that other group, don't we? With the TSCPA, and then
We kind of got written up, though, by the state, did we not, when we got our audit, because we didn't have our own proc, that we were relying strictly on TSCPA. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, but that was a finding, I think, in our
last performance
legislative
audit.
review, or whatever they called that thing.
and NASBA kind of puts that out there and says, hey, you can do that too.
Sorry, say that again?
It says, it seems like NASBA kind of puts it out and says that we can designate that.
They're not referring to that, though. They're referring to the proc, if you have one, or some other body, if you've designated a committee or something of that nature.
Three of us, or three, not us, but reporting directly to this board.
Right. Because while TSCPA or AICPA, the only teeth they have is to kick them out of the program. Ultimately, that is teeth, because you can't do a test work
you can't do
if you're
tests.
not in the program. So
Right.
that is teeth. There's no fines. There's no, that type of thing. From a regulatory standpoint, they can't do that.
I think if we're going to do anything, the worst case, the worst scenario we could do to put more teeth into the process is attach to their file a failed peer review report or something of that nature. And I don't know if we want to go down that path. That would be, I would not want that in my file, open for public viewing.
My understanding is, and I can get more clarification, that if there's back-to-back fails, most boards will open a complaint into that matter to determine whether they're violating the law or rule with regards to adhering to professional standards. Because if you're failing your peer review, likely you're not adhering to some of the audit standards or something like that, so which would be a violation of the rules.
Say these peer review reports are going to be furnished to us. Are they going to be actually mailed to us? Are they going to be available on a website and we can look at them if we want to? Or
Right, so they'll be available on a website that staff could log into, and you could pull up anybody by name if you wanted to. I think, if I recall correctly, you could also go in there and pull only the ones that received a pass with deficiencies or fail report. So you don't have to weed through everybody to find what you're looking for. But if you want to confirm if somebody had a peer review when they were supposed to have it, you could go in there and pull up and see the documents. But no, they won't be mailed. They'll be on a website that only this board staff would have access to.
So we're not getting all. Want to look at them, we can, kind of thing.
And there's no issue with that becoming a public record, just because.
I think as long as it stays in the portal, it's fine. But if we were to pull it down, I think that was the talk I heard previously.
do you need to check with legal counsel, did you say, regarding that? Or
I think we need to get confirmation on that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what point there is in pulling it down unless we're going to open a complaint.
Does the society have any feelings one way or the other on this?
far as what you do with the reports that are available in the
I
FSBA.
mean, do y'all
portal.
feel like this board needs to take stronger action when it relates to?
I think that you made a good point, Trey, in that, especially with the changes in there being 2 non-pass reports now, and the requirements and the responsibilities that now the full peer review committee has to review that and determine if they want to refer the firm to for hearing. I think that's a great point, that is, I think, a step in the right direction to move those firms along if they have not shown that they are taking the necessary corrective actions to improve. So I think that I think the program as a whole has taken some steps to address that. Whether a letter or something might have more teeth coming from the board, I don't know, but I do feel like those firms are going to be addressed on a more timely basis through the full committee process of the peer review program.
Anybody else have any thoughts on this? I guess, Wendy, I would just suggest we check with legal counsel, find out a little more about the ramifications of actually pulling the reports, and maybe you could give us some more thought as to whether we have enough resources to have an active program of going online and looking at the past with deficiencies and fail reports, or whether we just don't have the resources to do that, and we need to wait until we get a referral from the AICPA or TSCPA that we've got a firm that's a problem. So, okay, let's move on to the agenda item, peer review, new benchmarks, and I guess we're going to let Kara talk about this, maybe.
There's not a handout, is there?
As Wendy.
And Kara, just to let you know, we were not able to load the iPads.
Okay.
And so they have printout copies
Okay.
of your slides.
As Wendy mentioned, typically we would report on our annual report of oversight to the board. As she mentioned, those of you who are involved in the peer review program and process know that over the last year we've undergone a complete revamp of the computer system used to administer the program, and that's a program on a national basis that all administering entities are now using. With that new program, not all of that data was able to be pulled in reports and reliable information, and so the AICPA waived that requirement for the annual report on oversight. So that was not just a Tennessee Society decision not to provide that report. That was a waiver of that requirement by the AICPA. Hopefully those issues will be resolved and we'll be able to report on that next year. I can tell you that the TSCPA did comply with all oversight requirements as far as review requirements, our reviewer resume verification, as well as the annual administrative oversight that we have to undergo. And I provided the report on our oversight to Wendy yesterday, so she has that available. I just wanted to take a couple minutes of your time today to talk about the evolution of the peer review program. We've been talking about evolution of the program for well over a year now, and we are finally to the point where the AICPA has issued their final program model as well as the benchmarks that administering entities will be held to going forward. The focus of the new model for the program is to really enhance all aspects of quality related to the peer review program, and that starts with the administering entity all the way down to the reviewers. The program going forward will focus more on outputs versus inputs, and the AICPA has developed a set of measurable criteria or benchmarks that they will measure us against on a quarterly basis. There is also a focus on mitigating familiarity. As you can probably imagine, there are times where, if you're familiar with a reviewer or a firm, past experience could certainly impact a decision that you might make on work that you're seeing that reviewer or firm perform today. And so we are working very hard to ensure that objectivity and skepticism is present in all aspects of the program, starting with the tech review process and flowing down into our RAB and committee meetings. Administering entities will be held to these benchmarks. As I said, we will have to provide reporting to the AICPA on a quarterly basis. And for administering entities that do not comply with the benchmarks, they will go through a process of remediation, and ultimately, if they do not meet the benchmarks on a recurring basis, they could be removed as an administrator of the program. We are about to start a pilot period for the new benchmarks that will start July 1st and will run through September 30th. During this pilot period, we will self-monitor our performance and we will report those to the AICPA. I expect that through that self-reporting, the AICPA may tweak some of those benchmarks here and there. But we will report those in November through our plan of administration, and then January of 2019 will become that the pilot period will be over and all AEs will be held to those benchmarks going forward. As far as the society goes and our administration of the peer review program, we don't feel that the benchmarks or the new requirements really change a lot for us. At a minimum, we've got to document some policies and procedures that we have in place, but for the most part, we already had everything in process or in place that we needed. There is a requirement to have a CPA on staff. And I will be taking on that responsibility. That has been a point of contention for some states who don't have a CPA on staff, but we feel that we can meet that without any problem. We have a great tech reviewer, and we feel like we have a great committee, and we're in the process of developing some training for our committee to undergo this summer just to make sure that we are in a good position to comply with all of the benchmarks. I just wanted to update you all so that you know the steps that the AICPA is taking to really enhance the quality of the program, and then the steps that the TSCPA is taking to make sure that we are administering the program to the highest level of quality that we can. We know it's of utmost important, and we take that responsibility very seriously. I'm happy you've got the slides. I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to, but I just really wanted to update you on where we stand with that.
Does anybody have any questions for Kara? Kara, thanks very much. I know Tennessee does a great job with peer review, but being at some of the NASBA meetings, I know that there are a lot of states that really struggle with this process, and of course there'll be a lot of states getting out of the peer review business, I guess. They'll be hiring outside administering entities, but no questions. Let's move on.
I was going to say one thing, because we were talking about 6 months earlier, and I just want to make sure everybody realizes that in reality, from the date of the first fail report, you have three years and 6 months until the next review. So in theory, a repeat offender is only going an extra 3 years from their original 3. So I didn't want people to think we got through the second one and they had 6 years after that.
Okay. Next agenda item is titled Discuss Opportunities to Lower Fees, and I think we have a couple of guests here to help us with this agenda item. Wendy, you want to introduce our guest?
Yes. To my right here is Assistant Commissioner Carter Lawrence, and with him is our accounting manager for a couple of more days, Bill Huddleston. And so at the last meeting, and it's come up at several meetings, this board has asked a bit about, well, at what point do we start talking about reducing fees? We have a little over $1 million in our reserves, and when should we talk about that? When's the appropriate time? So I asked Carter and Bill to come talk to you all a little bit about that.
So first, thanks for letting us come down. Always love talking about fee reduction. It's my very favorite topic, especially
Not
because...
ours, typically.
Sorry?
It's not ours, typically.
Well, yeah, but I appreciate it because the General Assembly likes it so much. So they love knowing that it's something that we're looking at. And usually I'm having to go down and ask the boards to consider lowering fees. So was really happy to be invited to come down here to get to talk with you all about it. So to answer, kind of take the first part of the question as far as when the discussion on fee reductions should begin, there's not we don't have a policy that would state, for example, once your reserves reach $1 million, you need to start talking about it. This is done on a case-by-case basis. where we want to look to see what the financial picture is currently, and then try and look into the future as well to see what changes are coming up. Because we know there are some changes that are set by statute, where there are some pay raises that happen in increments that we can understand and project going forward. There are also some unexpected changes that happen. I'll give one example where we are in the process of looking at our real estate needs as a department overall. When that happens, there will ultimately be some real estate savings that will be realized by this board in addition to all our others. But that's something we don't know exactly when it's going to happen and quite to what extent. So I say that to talk about there's some uncertainty right now, and there have been some fluctuations with where the board's finances are, that I would not feel comfortable recommending to you a sizable fee reduction at this time. I think there are always some, maybe on the margins, some of the smaller fees that we could take a look at reducing, but would not feel comfortable recommending that the board look at reducing to the same extent that it did back 3 years ago.
2012.
Wow.
I believe it was 2012.
Okay. I would not feel comfortable making the recommendation of a similarly sized fee reduction at this point. So I'm going to actually stop right there, see if there are any questions, or if not, I'll let Bill Huddleston talk about more of the specifics of the financials and why that's the recommendation that I'm making.
A quick question. Is it because of the recurring nature of the reduction? Is that the issue more than anything else?
Right. So when we make the reduction, that'll be the new fee moving forward. And so we will have that certain knowledge that that's less, but we have some other expenses that we are not quite sure what they will be. There are uncertainties surrounding those. So, yeah, if I'm understanding the question
yeah, so
correctly.
Where I'm going, so I wonder what about a one-time fee holiday? Is that something y'all ever thought about or looked into? Where it doesn't have a recurring issue going forward, but it's a one-time thing.
Interesting. Yeah, my concern with that would be the rule process that would be necessitated takes so long that between affecting the rules to have the fee holiday, it would just be so much work to do that it might not be worth it in the end. Because what I'm recommending is that once a better picture of expenses is once that crystallizes, to maybe come back, so maybe in the next fiscal year, to talk about fee reduction at that point. That's an interesting idea, one that I've not previously heard. I'd need to talk with our legal to understand that a little bit better, but I know we'd have to affect this via rule, about a 9 to 12 month process, as you know, and I'm not sure if we could be able to default back to the fees where they are.
And you'd have to do it over a 2-year period.
Sorry?
You'd have to do it over a 2-year period.
Right.
Because people renew in odd and even years. And so somebody would get left out if you did it just for 1 year.
So we would have to do it through rule, though?
Holiday, you'd have to do a rule change?
It's my belief that we would, and I'll confirm that with legal, but all of our fees are set by rule.
I thought it was, yeah, okay. I can't take credit for that. I did somebody else's. I was just asking.
Great
just for the
idea,
record,
though.
It has been discussed. I think another state or two has done it. I've heard NASBA talk about, or at NASBA meetings, someone has mentioned that.
Ultimately, though, Commerce would have to approve a fee reduction. And right now, you're basically saying y'all would not approve that in this case.
It's my belief that it would go through the normal process of rulemaking, but yeah, it's something that we would have to sign off on, yes.
And what I'm hearing you say is you're not comfortable with that.
No,
so
if the board feels really strongly that it's what it that you want to lower fees, I will be comfortable with that. I just wanted to recommend that currently, given some uncertainties and some changes that have occurred over the past 6 months, that I think it probably wouldn't be prudent to make a sizable fee reduction.
Does the accounting manager know where we stand to date on our financials?
Excuse me, Bill Huddleston, and I do know because the budget close every year, the 4-year comparison, I put that out, and then the monthly P&L that comes out that's presented to you guys, I have that as well. So
these are all through the financials we have. Are they just through February? Is that
Correct.
and we're now in May. So I'm just curious where we ended April, just to get a better gauge of, are we going to have a surplus again this?
That's a good question. We're not. I think most likely you'll have a surplus. Right now, we're finishing up March upstairs. Actually, we're kind of, you understand, 20, 30 days behind due to closing and the process with F&A. But compared to last year, when we had the surplus of $210,000. That's not likely to happen again this year. I'm thinking it's looking.
Well, because we changed how people pay for their life. I mean, who pays for what on the 65 and older or whatever. We knew we were going to lose revenue off of that.
Right, and expenditures were down a good bit last fiscal year due to, I don't think we were staffed fully for the whole year. So that was about almost $100,000 that was in expenditures less than you would typically see. So I think right now for the P&L this year, you're averaging about $70,000 in expenditures a month. And we've gotten through that peak for renewals for revenue, and so we're going to see that start to trail off. I'm expecting, and this is just kind of an estimate, but probably somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 that we're going to be putting in the reserve this year.
What are some of the expenses that are kind of in flux that you're kind of waiting to get?
So one of the changes that happened was with the way that legal costs are billed. In the past, legal costs were done through looking at the cases and complaints. So it was it was not kind of individualized to the boards to the same extent that it is now happening through the actual usage. So now the legal costs are being applied to the boards according to the hours that legal is spending on them. And then there's some other, so that's for the program attorneys. For the legal management, that's still allocated in an across-the-board type manner. But that's one example. If you look at your legal expenses and you saw a variation, was that 2 months ago?
Starting in January.
But this began in January. So January was when legal expenses changed into the new method, and you've had some changes in your legal expenses since then.
You don't know if it's going to go up or down. It's just a more accurate way of reporting the expenses to each department. Is that?
Yeah, it's a more
higher.
accurate and equitable way of applying the fees because it actually shows the usage.
Not just who has the cash, right?
No, it's never just been who has the cash.
Just thought I'd get that.
We think we've come up with a more accurate way of applying those costs. But Accountancy did have an upswing in, I don't have it in front of me, was that January or February where January where they were significantly higher than some of the other months. And there were unique factors that contributed to that, but there's just uncertainty about how it will look moving forward. Before we moved into this new legal billing method, we looked backwards for 3 months where we looked at under the old method of billing with the case and complaint and under the new method of hourly billing so that we could compare for 3 months before we started with the new one. And it's consistent that Accountancy has had a little bit more variation and of a little bit more of an upswing under the new, more accurate and equitable billing method.
One thing that would not require rule changes is if we decided to offer a benefit to our CPAs in the state of Tennessee. We require state-specific ethics. If we were to supplement that to bring the cost of that down, I mean, it's possible we could do that, I would assume, without doing something dramatic like not collecting revenues for a year or 2 years or whatever it is. And then, I don't know. I'm just throwing around ideas on things that we could do. I don't know how Commerce feels about that, but it would increase our expenses for sure.
Right. What does that look like? I'm not familiar with
we
the process
require
for doing that.
Now the state societies providing our continuing ed on ethics. Like they have to take that course, and we made them the sole provider of that. So the question would be: could we supplement the cost of that to bring? If they're charging $35, the state could then pay $10 for every CPA or something. throwing that out there too. So that the cost would not be 35, it might be 25 for the practitioner.
I'd be happy to look into the feasibility of it, and then also look into the costs. Maybe it coming up with a couple different models. The question first, is this something that you could do, and then if so, what would that look like? Subsidized at a rate of $5, $10.
Right.
So, would be happy to look into that and come back to you on that. We had talked about that there are some smaller. I think, for example, the reciprocal fee is something that we could definitely take a look at. It kind of cleans up. This is kind of nibbling on the edges rather than eating the whole bite of pie. And it's what I would feel a little bit more comfortable recommending to you. And what were some of the other ones we talked about, Wendy?
Well, I'm not sure they're familiar with the reciprocal, but when somebody applies for a reciprocal license, they pay a $200 application fee versus if you took your exam in Tennessee and you're getting an initial license, it's $100. So for whatever reason, the process used to be different several years ago, where there was more of an evaluation, which is why that cost more. We no longer have that evaluation that has to occur. It's no more time consuming than doing an initial application.
Those are people outside of our state, and I don't feel like reducing their fees.
They're coming to the state to obtain a license.
But they're doing it in conjunction with one customer, or there's a reason they're doing that. I get that.
No, reciprocals are required when you move here.
Oh, when you move here.
When you move here. So if you hire someone at your firm from Ohio and
Then
they've
we
moved
require
here,
that
then you're going to they have to get a license here.
Okay.
So that's a reciprocal license. And so...
because we have mobility anyways, never mind.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
So, we could look at how many we get more applications than I thought we would get for that. But we do so that's a place we could cut back a bit and even that out with the initials. We have a fee if you don't update your address in 30 days.
Where we're in a weird position
of
is our surpluses were much greater in prior years. And it seems like now our surpluses are going to be less, but we still have this huge reserve. And so the question really is what do you do with the $1 million? Which means you got to be in a deficit at some point to get rid of the $1 million. And that's where I think Commerce is going to have a real problem, is how do we deal with the $1 million?
First, I'll say their board's in a worse, if you want to call it that, in a worse position from having reserves that are much larger.
Right.
So you can at least rest slightly assured knowing that there are other better targets out there. Secondly, in the past, when the funds have been swept, it hasn't come on a individual basis. It's been across the board. So I don't think we are in any sort of standpoint right now where we are talking about an imminent sweeping of the funds. But if it were to happen, it would be across the board. And you're right. As for spending down out of it, you'd have to have a significant negative year where you could be approaching the reserve. And as you all know, of course, 2 consecutive years in the red would trigger a sunset hearing, something I believe you'd like to avoid. So really, I think the goal is
2 years if we do it for our practitioners.
Yeah, but I mean, we could also do a fee holiday for less than the entire thing, right? So, like, your point is, if it's $30 to do the ethics, then we could do a $30 holiday for something for 2 years. Wouldn't get us in the negative. It wouldn't trigger the sunset hearing.
Right.
I don't think anybody
because it's
thinks
just
we
one
should
of the
not
2 years.
collect it. But if we were doing a $5 or $10 fee reduction, but the concern is the recurring
The
issue.
problem you got, if we only have a $30,000 or $40,000 surplus, we're going to have to go negative. That's not enough to give anything meaningful back to our practitioners.
But I mean,
It'd be
wasn't
like $1 a practitioner.
Raise fees and then cut it.
But the last time we did a fee reduction was only $5, right?
It was, but we still maintained surpluses.
Yeah.
But we got this $1 million reserve is really what I think the point is how do we...
How can we tap into that?
And for the record, I think it's good to have a healthy reserve. As a state employee and regulator, I think it's a good idea. But I also think it's a good idea that if we're going to, at any point, utilize the reserve for any mechanism whatsoever, my opinion should be that from a board standpoint, the beneficiary we should try first and foremost to let it be the folks we regulate and pay into that reserve. Which is why I think
revenue is pretty healthy.
Do I?
One times our revenue for annual revenue is pretty healthy.
So instead of it being swept and used for something else, it would be nice to be able to figure out a way to do it for a 1 or 2 year thing to our licensees.
I was just
Raise our salaries.
talking with Bill about this again, but F&A, Finance Administration, has made it very difficult for us to spend out of our reserves. Other than the migration to core, has there been any time we've been allowed to?
No. Core, that was kind of a special instance that they gave special permission, granted special permission to move some money out of reserve, not hit current year. Yes, yeah, right. And it's kind of capital project, so I guess, but other instances we've kind of been told, no, you're going to have to spend into a deficit, you're going to have to run a deficit through the operating, or through the year, and to get into it, so.
And we have tried. We've tried with multiple ways where we were told that it was too small. It wasn't a big enough capital hit like the core licensing system was. So we have continued and will continue to try to fund out of the reserves, but Finance Administration really hasn't permitted that, and I don't think that's likely to change.
Are there any other questions for Carter or Bill while they're here, or any other comments?
Only question is if we are actually interested in looking at a small fee holiday for 2 years, do we make that formal request to Wendy to look into the feasibility, or do we need to look at these folks here to see if C&I needs to? I don't know. If that's something we're interested in, how do we make the formal request to look into the feasibility of it? Yeah.
I don't, for what it's worth, from a parliamentary standpoint, I don't need a motion from you to come back down with that. I'm happy to come back with that. Unfortunately, without Bill, since he is moving on to greener pastures, but I'd be happy to come back at a subsequent meeting to talk about a small fee reduction and maybe present a couple of options for your consideration of how you could affect that.
Those numbers you're talking about will be a little firmer, those expenses that you're kind of...
I think in the next fiscal year that we'd be able to say with greater certainty what you can expect moving forward.
Is it something other than legal expenses that you are aware of?
Yes. There are a couple other things that come to the top of my mind. STS, which used to be OIR, that's basically our tech support, our tech people. They've changed and reorganized, and we've seen those expenses go up over the past year or so. Not quite a year, almost. So we're kind of trying to get a feel for that. We don't have a whole year of that yet. And then another thing that Carter had actually kind of briefly mentioned earlier is that some of these raises, TEAM Act that's in statute now, it requires pay raises, so that's in statute. So having to be self-sufficient based on our fees and deal with that, we know we're going to have 2 or 3% every year in salary increases, and you guys know, 2 or 3% this year is not a big deal, but exponentially down the road that could be considerable. So those are a couple of things that I think about going forward.
I want to come back to, it's not just a picture of doom and gloom on the horizon. The AWS changes that I'm sure Wendy has told you about, the AWS initiative, where this state is going to eventually, or the department rather, is eventually going to have some real estate savings related to that. So there's also some pretty big savings on the horizon. Just the extent of it and when it begins is still an unknown.
That is the work at home, is the AWS.
I forget not everyone is familiar with the terms that we throw around all the time. Apologies.
So 2% raise on our salaries too. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That 2% of zero is what's that?
$50. Yeah. And I think the breakfast expense too now is really starting to tighten our budget up a little bit too.
Blame that on Jim.
Okay. Any other serious comments?
Too serious.
Carter and Bill, we thank y'all for being here, and we'll communicate with you if we want you to come back with these couple of alternatives on fee reductions. So thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
You bring breakfast for us.
I'm just waiting for the spicy minis. They'll start that. They'll make a fortune.
We'll invite you every meeting if you get those.
Okay, so the only other way, Mr. Chairman, the only other way that I can think of to lower that deficit would be to come up with some kind of a prior period adjustment due to an error. If we could say, we really didn't mean to charge those fees in the past, and somebody made a mistake in billing.
Okay, that concludes the agenda of the executive committee. And Gabe, I know you had a meeting and joined us late, but are you ready to
Yes, sir.
adjourn or convene the enforcement committee?
And I don't have the committee agenda out, but I think the first thing is the complaint statistics. Is that right? Can we go through those?
I apologize, Gabe. We had some technical problems. We're not able to load the iPads. They will be available tomorrow, though. Do you want me to talk about the complaint?
Yeah, or whoever.
Okay.
Just going through them. I don't have them, or I'd go through them. I've looked at them. I just don't have them with me right now.
The complaint numbers document, we do this at each of the meetings, but this is just highlighting the number of cases that we have opened and closed each month in the first quarter of the year. So you will see, on average, we are opening 11 or so a month and closing 11 a month. So we had 71 cases at the beginning of January. As of April 1st, we had 69 open cases. So the top of the report shows you the nature of those cases, and then in the closed section shows you how those were dealt with, whether there was a consent order, it was closed with no action, etc. At the very bottom on the left, this is just the status of all the complaints that are currently in the pipeline. So you have everything from a complaint that might have been filed the past couple days to one that's on the legal report for you all to consider today, to some that are in litigation monitoring. So we run the gamut, and this bottom section tells you kind of where they are in the process. So I'll entertain any questions if anybody has questions.
Have any questions on this? Okay. I think we're ready to move on. On the committee, on the agenda, the next thing is looking at the consent agenda for the legal report. Before we do that, I had a conversation with Shalina and Wendy earlier this week around a couple of issues that popped up, and I think it's worth us having as a committee and really the whole board this conversation just so we have some context. So, Wendy, can I kick that back to you? I mean, we can kind of just give us a really high level of what you're seeing, what we're starting to see, and you'll see it in some of the recommendations from legal counsel on these on the legal report, the non-consent agenda, where, for example, some folks had some CPE audits, and instead of responding to the audit or instead of really engaging with the staff, they just requested that their status be changed to inactive. And so we want to make sure that we aren't somehow setting some precedent and setting some incentives out there. I'm a market person, right? So I'm afraid we may set some incentives to some folks who may end up deciding that it's not worth the hassle if they missed some of their CPE from a reporting period, and they may just ask to go inactive. And then what's out there is out there, and maybe if they want to come back and change their status to active again, they may have to do some stuff. But anyway, that's high level, but can you give us a little more detail for the committee and see if they have any questions?
So some of the cases on this particular report and what we're seeing actively in the office is we just sent out audit notices, as you all know, and what happens is they get the audit notice and then they immediately want to go change to an inactive status. So just so everybody's aware, we have been informing them that while we are happy to do that, we are changing the status, but they are still obligated to comply with the audit. So, and if somebody moves to inactive, we still have jurisdiction over them. So that's been the current practice. And you will note that in some of the cases in the report that they did this last year, these folks. Requested to go inactive, thought that was going to relieve them of the audit. They aren't really practicing, and so they didn't do the CPE. We gave them extra time. They still didn't do it, and here we are trying to determine whether to assess penalties or not. So I think the conversation we had is it appropriate to go ahead and allow them to change the status, Or might it be better that we do not allow them to change status until they comply with what we've asked them to do? And as I thought about it more after I got off the phone with Gabe and discussed it with Leanne, our education coordinator, from an audit standpoint, we would want them to respond to the audit. Meaning they either respond that they didn't do anything, or they respond that they've got half of it and they still have to finish the other half. We want a response. That we definitely want that. I'm not sure about waiting until they comply with everything, because then they continue out there with an active license where they should be getting CPE, but they're not. And is that an issue, in the public if they're not getting what they need to get? So that's some conversation about whether we go ahead and have them change their status or tell them that they can't till they've complied with any action we've asked them to do.
So I'd open it up to the committee members or any of the board members have thoughts on this, and I'll just say my initial thought, without a whole lot of thought on it, was just kind of off the cuff, was if what they want is the change in status, then it seems to me like it's worth holding that back until they do what they need to do, right, in order to escape some type of CPE requirements that everybody else who had an active status when they did had to comply with. Do they get off scot-free because they get to change the inactive status, and then maybe there's an action against them, maybe it's not. Maybe y'all are frustrated with them because they're not complying with the audit, but you come to us and we're like, well, they're inactive, so why do we really want to go after them? Does that look like we're being penalized? I don't know. That was my thought, but I'm open to it.
I would say that they can't go inactive until they meet the requirements for holding their license for the previous years. If I knew I was going to retire at age 65, and I go through and I don't, maybe you didn't select me at 63, but in theory I could go 2 years, not get my CPE, and then just say, oh, I'm going inactive. And I just don't think that's what we want to be doing. If I'm going to be practicing for those 2 years, that would be a way for me to escape having to do CPE in those years, correct?
Now keep in mind that previously, we've let them move to inactive, but we tell them they still have to comply with the audit. If they don't, we open a complaint and they end up on the report, which is what you've seen today. But now we're in a situation where these folks are inactive, so what do? Do we charge them a penalty and make them get CPE if they're not practicing anymore?
Here's my deal. They broke the rules by not getting the CPE.
Right.
So that's not on us as a board.
Right.
That's on that practitioner for not getting his required education.
Okay.
I want to say, it seems to me like there's two separate things going on. If somebody wants to go inactive, they ought to have the right to file the paperwork and go inactive. But if they were an active licensee and CP was required, we ought to hold them accountable for that, even though they may go inactive the next year or whatever. I can see where you would have a practitioner thinking, well, I want to continue to get my CPE and stay active, but then it gets to be a real burden for them. And so when they get this audit notice or it's time to renew, they realize they haven't met the requirements and think, gosh, this is just more trouble than I want to do. And so I want to go inactive. We ought to let them do that. But for the period that they held an active license, they ought to be held accountable for the CPE and whatever it takes. If we have a penalty and getting those hours, that's what they need to do. So,
Any more power, control, whatever, over them if they are now inactive? We've said we still can hold them accountable, so we might just as soon they went inactive and are not out there practicing and still violating the rules. But I initially agreed with you, Trey. I thought, well, don't let them off the hook. But it sounds like we're not letting them off the hook, even though they're going inactive.
Well, I think we're always going to have this issue because we're auditing CP, 10% of the folks a year? So there's always going to be people who apply to go inactive who weren't audited for CPE, and they may not get audited for CPE, and it is what it is. We don't know, right? But the thing that frustrated me was there's 3 or 4 cases out of 10 or 11 on this where people waited till the audit, realized they were 40 hours short, and they said, oh, I'll just go inactive. And I think in that situation, there should be some level, at least in the law piece, where you basically have to make sure your license is in good standing before you can change.
Well, not only that, these folks didn't even really respond, right?
One of them didn't.
I think most of this group are folks that did respond, but just didn't get the amount they were supposed to get.
Not on the committee, but it seems to me if they're going to remain inactive, there should be a penalty. I mean, there's no point in them continuing to do the CPE, but we should have a penalty for them not having done what they should have done when they were active. That seems to me like that would be. I don't know that doing a penalty and requiring them to go back and do CPE for something they're not going to do in the future.
I'm 40 hours short. I'd be glad to pay $1,500 to not have to take the CPE.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be probably cheaper.
I mean, I guess that's what we're a little bit afraid of. We don't want the penalty to be
commensurate with.
To be better than actually getting the CPE.
Yeah.
That's the concern, I think. Yeah. Is heck, if I get caught, I'll just pay the $1,000 or whatever.
Pay $1,000.
They broke the rules. Yeah. I mean, they broke the rules. If they didn't do this, I don't know.
I think where I'm coming from is I don't have a necessarily a problem. I think I agree with you, Pam. If we let them go inactive, that doesn't bother me because frankly they're not going to get the CPE going forward. They don't want to and they won't need it. That doesn't bother me, but I think they should still be held to account for what they did not do during their active period when they should have, and in particular if they are not responsive to the audit request and the follow-up. Then I think we should do what it looks like we are doing, which is we're holding them out for disciplinary action.
Penalize them on the back end too if they go active again from that standpoint.
No, so I think what we were trying to recommend here was that although they're inactive, they'd have to pay the fine and go ahead and get the CPE. And then if they decide to reactivate later, they're going to have to get a whole nother round to meet that requirement. So this is penalty. I mean, this is penalty for not meeting. I mean, for the most part, you can't use it to.
If you don't get your hours and you come up front, you have to do penalty hours if you don't get it, right? Or do you?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To get current, you have to do extra hours.
And that is included in the recommendation.
But that's an automatic. If I got selected for audit and I was cooperative and I didn't get it, then I'd have to go do penalty hours just to be compliant.
And that's what happens. So we pick you for audit. Yep. You submit the stuff. You're 10 hours short. You got to get 10 hours plus whatever appropriate penalties there are, depending on which benchmarks you missed. We give you 180 days to get that done. Yeah. These people you're seeing on these reports didn't even do it in the 180 days, the extra time we gave you to get it done.
That's where I have a problem.
I agree. That's the issue. Okay. So I don't know that we had any specific ask other than have the conversation, but I guess
once we get to those cases, maybe it will.
Yeah, and going forward, that's what I was going forward. We can just have this context when we discuss the cases. I think that's good. Any other comments? I know we beat that horse a few times. Okay. On the consent agenda, you all received it in email earlier in the week. Actually, it was last week. I've looked through it. I'm assuming you all have because we know we're supposed to do that. I want to present it as a consent agenda, but first, are there any questions for the legal counsel for any of these cases specifically that anybody has?
Gabe, if you don't mind, I know when we talked about these CPE, never mind, these are all for closure. Sorry.
Yeah. I have one question just as a follow-up. On number 3, Shalina, did we confirm with the Secretary of State's office that this person actually has a doing business as filing?
Okay, yes, we have checked, and there is no filing. They are a sole practitioner.
Okay. All right. That's the only question I had. Any other questions?
I had a question on number 3, the $1,000 penalty. Is that appropriate given that there was a, I guess, past penalties?
You're on the consent
agenda.
Oh, am I on the wrong one?
So all the ones on the consent agenda, remember, are things that we've looked at, investigated, and the recommendation from legal counsel is just to close. There could also be a closure with a letter of warning or something, but there's no adverse action recommended that we're going to take. We're just going to approve this.
In that case, I don't have a question on number 3.
It's up to
closing flag. What are you flagging? What is that?
We're just closing. There may be a couple that get they close the appeal, but they also get a letter of warning. But there's no flag, right?
Oh, one on here is number 1's got a closing flag.
Okay, so the closing flag means that if that individual comes back to try to reactivate or reinstate their license, we would be flagged that there was an open disciplinary action. So
close, you wouldn't know.
Right, correct.
So accept a motion on this report on the consent agenda.
Moved.
All right. Got a motion to agree with the recommendations in the consent agenda from legal counsel. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion, a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Can we vote by voice?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Last thing is the legal report itself. We also received this last week, looked through it. There are a total of 12 cases on the report. And when we had our pre-conversation, I'm sorry, there are 15 on the report. When we had our pre-conversation, I had a question about number 1. So maybe can we talk briefly about that one, and then can you walk through numbers 2 through 15 for us?
Sure. In this particular case, in number 1, I am going to change my recommendation to litigation monitoring because this individual is still meeting the terms of the, in this case it's called an ARD because they're in Pennsylvania, and they are to divest themselves of any interest in accounting, any accounting business before May 4th. And today is the 4th, so we will need to, tomorrow is the 4th, so we'll need to follow up with Pennsylvania to make sure that has happened. So we're just temporarily putting it in a hold status in litigation monitoring instead of taking action, and this will come back before you in July.
I felt like that was the right recommendation to make sure that we don't take action preemptively because, it'll be next week at the earliest before Pennsylvania even knows if this person complied. Any other questions on number 1 or anything? If it's okay with the committee and with Wendy and legal counsel, we'll just go through all of them, and then we'll just vote on them and note any amendments or changes to the recommendations before we do that. Charlene, can you start with number 2 then?
Sure. Number 2 is 2018001741. This involved a CPE audit. The respondent did not meet the CPE requirements, and there was a deficiency, and indicated that his computer crashed and was unable to provide those certificates, only the ones that were printed. And he also has a job as a CFO and just was unable to do those CPE, and then requested that his license be placed in inactive status. So I'm recommending that you authorize a formal hearing with authority to settle by consent order upon the respondent's payment of the civil penalty of $1,000 and completion of 102.5 CPE hours within 90 days of execution of the consent order. If he declines to settle the matter, we will proceed forward with the formal hearing, of course, and then the respondents will still be required to pay the $1,000 and submit proof of any missing penalty hours when they reapply.
They really said he was just too busy to do it.
Essentially,
and then the dog ate his homework, too.
So I think that when we discussed with Gabe the other day, the second part of that was since he's inactive, when Shalene and I had this conversation, I suggested maybe we bifurcate it and have the $1,000 due now and the CPE due upon reapplication, but there was some concern over that when we talked about bifurcating something. So the last part, it's kind of an either or, not both.
Is it charge $1,000 and make him do the hours?
No, we can. So that we should have probably just stuck with that. But what's likely going to come back, he's going to come back and try to settle with, I'm not working type thing, and argue the CPE hours. So
all he's got to do is go call the company he took the CPE from and get the certificates. Right.
So I think it makes more sense, Shalina, if we end it at the 2015-16 period, and then the rest of that would be taken off. Does that make more sense to everybody?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that way it wouldn't be a $2,000 payment overall. It would just be the $1,000 at whatever time this respondent decided to pay it, because in all likelihood they're not going to pay the $1,000, and we'll just proceed to formal hearing as a practical matter. So it'd just be one payment of $1,000.
hours,
Right.
period.
in 90 days, right?
Yeah.
And so,
If they don't do that, I mean, if they're gone inactive, I mean, we could start another process to suspend a.
so what will happen is this person will get a consent order saying, you know, you can do these two things, and if you choose not to, then we'd hold a hearing.
Have the authority to decide that, too. Yeah.
But just as a timeline, were they selected for audit? I guess they would have been selected audit after his renewal period ended, right?
Correct.
How long?
So this was for the 15-16 year, so we would have selected for audit in April.
You had 4 months after the actual year ended, plus 180 days. Is
Right,
that right?
because he likely responded and said, I didn't get it. So we said, well, you owe this much.
Effectively, by October of that following year was the length of time he had
Correct.
to correct his issues for
And
the
he,
previous 2 years.
right, we didn't correct them, so we opened a complaint. And now what we're saying is you now owe money plus the CPE in order to get back good.
Questions?
Just to clarify, so the recommendation is going to, in essence, stop after, in the fourth line of the recommendation after 2015, 2016, and the rest will be deleted.
Basically,
right?
the first two sentences.
Okay.
Assuming we vote on it and approve it. Any other questions on number 2? Okay, can we go to number 3, please?
32017077341. This was a complaint filed against a licensee for misrepresentation through the improper use of a CPA title on the preparer line of Form 990. The respondent provided a response and stated it was an oversight. They only prepare one Form 990 a year and failed to remove that CPA designation. My recommendation is to authorize a formal hearing with authority to settle by consent order with a civil penalty of $1,000 for the respondent's use of the CPA designation.
Questions?
Yeah, this is number 3, right?
Yep.
I mean, just as a point of reference here, we've had numerous complaints about this individual. Is that?
License is currently in a revoked status.
Were those prior penalties, did it say if they were paid or not?
No, I'm not positive if the license was revoked for failing to comply with an order or otherwise.
I believe there was an issue with payment.
Okay.
So the consent order authorizes revocation if for non-payment, and that's more than likely what happened. They were revoked for non-payment of the consent order.
So I'm just wondering. So if that's the case, and you have this, they're not going to pay the $1,000 for this, right? So this will just go on the record in case this person ever decides to get relicensed. Is that what we're just piling on in case they decide to relicense?
Does this ever go to court? Like if they don't pay the fines?
Yes, we can open another complaint for non-payment, but in this case, I mean, this will be another consent order that will be sent out, and it will be on their record as disciplinary action, too.
I've asked this question before years ago, and I can't remember the answer. Do we get judgment lien status on this or not? We don't?
Typically not.
Okay. Okay. I mean, it seems practically that the person probably won't pay it, but I don't think that we shouldn't assess it because of that. I think we should treat them like we treat everybody else. That's my opinion. Any other comments on number 3? Okay, number 4.
For 2018002291, this was another situation where the respondent was selected for CPE audit. He did not meet the CPE requirements and sent in some of the certificates of completion for the deficient CPE hours. I'm recommending authorization of a formal hearing with authority to settle by consent order with a civil penalty of $1,000.
Questions?
You said he sent in some of them, but in the narrative here.
I'm sorry, it's the certificates for the 18 deficient CPE
So he sent
hours.
all of them.
It was sent late.
But it's
that's
a
all.
month late.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay. Number 5, please.
Number 5 is 2018002351. This is a situation where the respondent was selected for a CPE audit. The respondent provided a response and stated she has not practiced since 1989. The respondent is 65 years old and approaching retirement, has no intention to use the CPA license in any capacity, and has requested to be placed in inactive status. I'm requesting authorization of a formal hearing with the authority to settle by consent order with a civil penalty of $1,000 and completion of the 52 hours within 90 days of execution of the consent order. And I'm deleting the last sentence following 2015-2016 period, the remaining part of that paragraph.
Do you know if this person had been completing CPE or if they hadn't completed any since 1989? I mean, was she really inactive, I guess?
I don't know the answer to that question. I could probably find out if
That would be helpful to know.
if the person hadn't been ever selected for audit before. We'd have that, right, Karen?
Just because somebody doesn't practice per se, that doesn't mean that they're not using the title, because of the way our law is now.
Yeah, that's true.
You'd have to do all this just to use the title.
So again, do you want us to hold this until they can look tomorrow and not vote on it?
Well, I guess I would just like to know if a person was really inactive or not.
Sure, I will find out and report back to you.
We hold that one when we get to voting. Can we just hold this one open then and not vote on it until tomorrow? Okay.
Can I ask another question? Are we, or would you rather we not comment on any of this yet? My only question was, in a case like this, and I think we touched on this a while ago, in a case like this where someone truly is going to retire, and the taking of the CPE is of no benefit to them or us really, would we consider a higher penalty? So in other words, give them a choice: would the penalty of $1,000 plus 50 hours of CPE, or penalty of $2,500?
Under the matrix, it's $1,000.
But again, their matrix isn't binding. The matrix is a guidance document, right? So we were really
ways of dealing with the problem.
Yeah, and I would just say that because I was the one that was so hell bent on us getting a matrix. But the point is, the matrix isn't binding. So let's, if we have a reason to deviate, I think that's a great point. I think we need to just note that.
I'm not opposed to that, but if she has kept her certificate up, then hasn't she been signing something every year saying she was getting CPE?
There ought to be something.
I mean, that's
I think
concerning.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I think for sure we should hold this one open, not vote on it, and let y'all look into see what you can see, and then we can just present it to the board tomorrow.
Karen's been able to.
Why are we holding this one open? How is this one different?
Because we may not think that $1,000 is sufficient if what they're saying is correct, that she hadn't been doing anything since 1989.
She wants to know if they did CPE. They want to know if they did CPE in prior years. She says she's been inactive since, 89 or whatever.
This just came up in an audit, so she may not have ever been audited before, but she could have potentially been misstating something on her
She want to know if she was actually inactive.
registration.
Yeah. It's a violation of the rules. I agree. You probably have to sign something that says, I took the hours, and yes, I'm keeping up with my. That's the rule. If you break the rule, there's consequences.
And that might be the way to deal with it, the way you're talking, Larry.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to do something different if you want us to do, but the way I thought of it is we can get more information, and then we can present it to the board tomorrow, let the board make the decision.
Say Karen is
Outside of committee.
She's still looking on one more piece, but I bet by the time we get to the end,
Okay.
she will have the information that we need.
Can we go to number 6 then, please?
62018002391. This respondent was selected for a CPE audit. They were notified of the deficiency and required to complete them within 180 days. They provided a response and stated it had not been completed, that this respondent is a caregiver to 3 individuals and is unable to complete the CPE. So I am recommending that you authorize a formal hearing for authority to settle by consent order with a civil penalty of $1,000 and completion of 112 CPE hours within 90 days of the execution of the consent order.
Questions on number 6?
Just so I understand this, you got 112 hours, which says these are penalty hours. Is there other hours that are the actual hours she has to complete? Am I reading that wrong? 112 hours are considered penalty hours and may not be used to satisfy renewal requirements.
We have used that in the past in the wording and the consent orders so that those hours aren't used for the next renewal season.
Okay.
So, but now that you say that, that's not in the other entries.
Right.
So we either need to strike it from here or add it to the other entries. Does that part make sense? So so this person owes.
What does she have to do to actually, if she had her 80, what would? What's she short?
She that is not totally listed here, meaning I'm not sure if she submitted any. Oh, she not say that CB had not been completed. So
She's got 0.
So she had 0. So she owes the 80 plus the penalties, and there's 8 hours for each benchmark that you don't miss. So some some of the times that number's a little.
We need to be more clear though that you got to complete the original 80, and then complete the 112 penalty hours.
It's not 112 penalties.
Oh, it's not 112 penalty hours.
You're saying it's 80 as part of that 112.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're just saying that of all that 112, you can't use that for the next renewal season, even though you're in it right now.
So why would we not say complete your 80 original hours and the, 32 penalty hours, which then cannot be used for the next renewal period?
You think that's clearer? We can certainly.
I'll clarify
What
that.
about just putting future in front of renewal to satisfy future renewal requirements?
Yeah, and I guess my question is, I think the rules already state this, right? When you have penalty rule hours, you can't apply them. So, my thought would be...
It's fine to notify the individual if they can't do it, but I'm having trouble discerning which hours are which here.
I will clarify that and note that these are 80 hours due as well as the 32 hours of penalty hours.
And that becomes clear that those by rule cannot be used.
I think historically we've put the breakdown in, and we've also been clear that they can't be used for the following period.
Now, are you meaning that none of them can be used, or only the 32 penalty hours can't be used?
32, right?
I would think all of it, because you're
Well,
taking.
80 is going to go count towards the previous year.
Yeah, but you're taking it now, which means you're in your next renewal cycle.
She can't count it for 2 periods.
That's why we said these are considered penalty and cannot be
Could you-
used for renewal.
Could you
Next.
double dip if we didn't say that?
I'm not sure the rule tells you can't.
I can't just take one
See how you
course.
could-
and
The
do
penalty
that.
hours, yes, the penalty hours are in addition to your requirement, but there's nothing in the rules that say that if you took hours right now that you can't use them for renewal unless we tell you you can't.
For the next renewal period? I
Right,
don't see how you could do that.
but, right, so why not? Because so if.
80 to me is the deficiency. You're deficient 80.
I thought the 80 was the
was what
the hours she didn't get,
That's right.
or
That
the
is.
15,
That is.
16
That's her
period.
deficiency.
She's
So you're
concerned that
saying
that
she
person
could
would
use
take those
these
hours.
15, 16, 80 hours to fulfill her 17, 18 renewal. Is that what you're
Right,
saying?
because she's taking them in 18, and she may just count them on her sheet as being acceptable for the current.
All you got to
The
say
only
is
way we
that these
would know.
hours can be used for future
Yeah.
periods.
The only way we would know if she did that was if she's audited again, correct?
For sure, correct.
But that's the only
Hey, the way
way
it's
you would
written,
know that she fulfilled
It's clear
what
what
we
she has to do.
requiring
She
her
has to do
to do.
112 or 100 and something hours, and they're penalty hours. Therefore, penalty hours can't be used for satisfaction. So, Doesn't it kind of take care of it?
Seems to me like the way it's written would work, but if we want to change it, make it clear, I think we just
That's
got
fine. I
to,
just was-
we'd have to say 80 hours
Yeah.
and 32 penalty, none of which can be used in the future or something
I
like
guess
that.
my concern, though, is that I don't see how you could use hours for 15, 16.
'Cause you didn't take them then, you're taking them now.
She's saying that she could just.
I don't see it, but I guess if
Well, somebody.
that doesn't make
My
sense.
thing
to
is,
me.
I bet, well, I got a different question that's not related to this. How long does it take us to do one of these audits?
I'll let the audit expert over here.
Well, in past years, we've usually had them completed by the October meeting
I'm talking
following.
about just an individual.
Oh, one individual audit?
Like
If-
I
if-
email you mine, it's all scanned to you. Is that how you normally get it, or is that unusual?
Yes, we try to process them in the order that we receive them. If everything's in order and all the certificates are, corresponding to the credits reported, then it's very, very quick turnaround the same afternoon.
Where I'm heading with this, if they didn't get their hours this time when they were selected for audit, it's probably likely that they didn't do it for the period prior to that as well. And I'm wondering, do you go back and make them submit? It's kind of like when the IRS finds fraud, they can open all years, right? Normally they can only go back 3. But it's kind of like, I'm not saying this is fraud necessarily.
Span scope.
But yeah, exactly. A term I'm very familiar with. Because it just makes me wonder, in the situation where it says that she hadn't practiced since 1989, I guarantee she hadn't had CPE since 1989.
I'll be right.
Triple dip. Yeah.
Isn't there a part of our rules says that you have to keep these CPE records for a period of 5 years? I mean,
Yes.
the individual, so it would be hard to go back beyond 5 years.
No, I wouldn't go back to 89. I'm just
Yeah.
saying go to the period before just to see what kind of person
Yeah.
we're dealing with. It's a one-time thing, or is this kind of the MO?
We do not expand scope. We could,
How many people are short when y'all do these audits?
so I think the last time I was looking at the numbers, it was about 13% were non-compliant.
That is a high rate.
So there's been actually a lot of talk at NASPA meetings. It was a big conversation at the directors meeting about states indicating a high non-compliance rate with CPE, and some states are going to full reporting.
And we're wondering why the failure rates are up on peer reviews.
Yeah, good point.
So some states are going back to or never left full reporting, and those have the lowest rate of non-compliance. I can't imagine us trying to look at everyone's CPE. But I think some of the comments were just the nature of requiring someone to upload all their certificates and state what they took is more reason for them to comply than not, even if we can't look at it all.
Did they give any kind of reasons why they think the non-compliance rate's up?
No, I think there's some guesstimate that because we've gone to more of a checklist mentality, just an affirmation that, yeah, I've completed it and we're not checking everyone's records. That's the only, and there's no research behind that at all. I mean, these were just conversations.
Argument against asking for the documentation. I know you may not want to expand your audit, but if just having people turn in the documents is a form of motivation.
I think previously it was a voluminous task. Now it is an electronic task, so maybe it's something to revisit. It is something in addition that the right, and I really hesitate that's going to create a more significant process at renewal time. Our rules allow for you to not submit everything and attest to.
The AICPA does it the same. I mean, well, of course, they don't even require reporting, but.
No, and I also, you could expand scope on the audit, but the more licensees we get, the more we have to audit every year. I mean, we're at almost 540 this year. That's a lot.
You're going to start losing a lot here pretty soon.
So when you do the audit, you ask for all certificates, right?
Correct.
So if you had, just as an example, this is what I do because just for myself, but like a spreadsheet to keep track of all this stuff, and if they submitted that and you could sample that sheet as opposed to getting everything. I mean, it is a huge chore to send in all those certificates.
I mean, I don't think that would be much different than what we currently do.
Well, if it comes up to the same, you would have 100% reporting of what they said they did, but
So
you wouldn't be testing 100%
Right.
of all
Right.
the courses
Right.
taken.
So you're
Got
just-
a
It's just
13%
a
failure rate. I'm just telling you, the penalties we're doing today don't seem to be having an effect.
I guess my question for this board is, do we want to go back to these few and start thinking about whenever you do a CPE audit and you failed to respond or fail, do you want us to go back and audit their prior period? Or do you want to put them on the list to audit it the next time?
That may be just as good. I don't.
An audit,
It's
we can
selected
do
for
it.
audit and you fail to produce the hours that you're required to have, that you're automatically checked for audit the next time. Or
How do the deficient people usually answer the question? Do they say,
got busy.
no, I didn't do my CPE? I mean, do they honestly answer it, or they just check it and then they get caught? I mean, you ever have people
I think
that
it's
just
a little bit of both. Some people are
honestly say,
honest.
No,
Some
I
people-
didn't do it.
Some people are honest, I didn't do it.
Is that-
And some people say they did it, and they really didn't.
I would be curious which state has the lowest failure rate on this, on CPE requirements, and what their penalties are for not complying. Now, I know
More statistics.
Yeah, I love statistics. But obviously, if somebody's got a lower failure rate, there must be some corresponding reason why.
Alabama tells me they have like a 1% failure rate, but they do like a double audit. They require they check everyone's when it comes in, then they do an audit on top of that, and I don't know what the reason is.
What are they auditing on top of that?
Re-audit?
I guess a re-audit. I have no idea. I don't know. I don't really understand. But they are ones that have reported a very low percentage of noncompliance. But it's because I think they're checked twice.
But that shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Checking it twice.
Santa Claus.
But they actually check at the renewal. When they're renewing, they have a fairly large staff, and people are checking those when they're renewing.
Are you saying they're submitting certificates when they renew?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's 100% audit.
Basically, yeah. So I don't know why they go back and audit again. It doesn't make any, but that's what they've done. But yes, they're doing 100% audit.
Or doing what we were talking about earlier, where they just submitted the documentation.
Yeah.
But they're not
They
thinking
think they're
about
getting off
fee
good.
cuts, those kind of services.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Fee cuts.
So, number 6. Any more questions on number 6?
I think we're going to clarify the 80 and 32, correct?
Right. And that they can't be used for future periods.
Right.
All right, number 7. Can we go through 7 and 8 pretty quickly, because I think they're straightforward.
Number 7, 2018-002521. The respondent was selected for a CPE audit, provided a response. The CPE hours were saved on a work computer of a prior employer, and provided those CPE hours and provided the certificates. There's a deficiency of 39.5 hours for the audit period. I'm requesting authorization for a formal hearing with the authority to settle by consent order with a civil penalty of $1,000 and the completion of the 39.5 CPE hours.
Questions? Everybody comfortable with this language around not being able to use them in the future? Okay, number 8.
Number 8, 2018-005671. This was a complaint filed by the Board of Licensing Contractors against the respondent, who holds a CPE license and prepared a review opinion but was not associated with a firm. There was no evidence of any peer review enrollment. The respondent admitted to preparing the review opinion and was not enrolled in a peer review. The respondent also stated that this was an isolated situation and there were no other review opinions prepared. I am requesting authorization for a formal hearing with the penalty of $3,000 for failure to enroll in peer review or submit proof of enrollment in an approved peer review program or submit an exemption form to the board within 30 days.
This is consistent with other cases like this, right, Shalina?
Yes, sir.
Any questions?
I have one, now that I'm reading this for probably the 5th time. He wasn't associated with a firm and wasn't enrolled in peer review. Have we assessed a penalty in the past for not having a firm permit in addition to the peer review?
We have done.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
9 then.
Number 9, 2018-010-391. This was a complaint filed by the Board of Licensing Contractors for a respondent who prepared a review report to accompany a renewal application of a business owned by the respondent, meaning a contractor business. The respondent holds a firm permit, but the firm is not enrolled in peer review. The most recent renewal form indicated the firm did not provide attest services. The respondent stated that he was a licensed contractor and was renewing his license and requesting an increase in the financial limits for the contracting license. The review report was part of the renewal process, and the respondent never intended to provide attest services with the self-prepared review report. I'm requesting authorization of a formal hearing with the authority to settle by consent order with a civil penalty of $3,000 for failure to be enrolled in a peer review, a $1,000 civil penalty for issuing a review report for a company owned by the respondent because this is a violation of the independence standards under Rule 0020-03.03, and $1,000 for a violation of the professional standards.
Questions? So this is somebody who's a CPA with their own firm who's also a contractor and prepared their own file. Okay, number 10, please. 10 and 11.
Number 10, 2017070201, Respondent 1. Number 11, 2017080411, Respondent 2. The Respondent 1 is the firm. A complaint was filed against the respondent stating the firm and owner didn't exercise due professional care in the filing of the complainant's 2016 tax return. The respondent failed to file the complainant's tax return by the IRS extended deadline. The respondent then closed its firm shortly after the October 16th tax deadline, but no notification was provided to the complainant. The other issue was that the respondent failed to notify the board of the change in employer and failed to respond to the board's requests related to the complaint. It was determined the complainant's tax return was not filed by the extended due date as promised by the respondent. Now, the respondent did change employers without notifying the board within the 30-day required time period and didn't respond to any requests by the board for a response. I'm requesting you close as to Respondent 1 since that firm is closed, and as to Respondent 2, the individual, authorize a formal hearing with authority to settle by consent order with a civil penalty of $1,500, $1,000 for the failure to exercise due professional care in the performance of professional services, and $500 for failure to notify board of the change in status and failure to respond to the board.
Talk to this individual? It says he didn't respond originally, but I just didn't know if y'all ever did talk.
There was an investigation. I will defer to Sherry.
Yes, we made multiple attempts to contact the licensee by email and by phone. Actually, tracked the respondent down to their current employer, left a message there. So there was multiple attempts, but we received no response to the original complaint or response to my inquiries.
So when we talked about this on the phone, I told you my concern about this is that we're creating an incentive for people when they get in trouble to close a firm down and escape punishment. So, I mean, it seems to me like we would not assess the penalty on the firm simply because they closed it down, because then they'll just reopen it again and they don't have an issue. So,
correct. So if we were to assess this individual, that penalty would be $3,000.
we not assess against the firm, even though the firm's closed down, because they're the owner of record of the firm, right?
Yes, typically that's the case. In this situation, I believe this firm was sold, so it's no longer in operation either.
It was sold, but it's under another firm name.
There is another firm name.
Just the client list was sold.
Have y'all, I mean, have they already closed the firm and surrendered the permit or whatever they do to do that?
Yes, meaning there's no legal entity anymore either.
Well, can
They
we,
received proceeds for selling that client list, and
can we just, legally, can we just attach the firm penalty to the person if we wanted to do that?
Assess that against this individual because they were responsible for the firm at the time of the violation.
Would be my suggestion. I don't know what the committee feels like.
I would feel similarly. I agree.
Okay.
I will change this civil penalty to $3,000 for failure to exercise due professional care.
Almost done. Number 12.
Number 12, 2018-005191. The respondent had been terminated from a peer review program, and the respondent failed to cooperate, citing a failure to respond to the inquiries from the AICPA. The respondent did not cooperate with the investigation, and multiple requests for documents were ignored by this respondent. The respondent claimed the firm is no longer providing attest services. However, the firm appeared to provide attest services up to 2017, and there had not been a completed peer review for attest engagements occurring after December 31st, 2011. The respondent did not provide consent for the TSCPA to release the peer review correspondence to the board and failed to provide the documents for purposes of this investigation. The mitigating circumstances in this case was that the respondent is embroiled in an ongoing divorce proceeding, and the possible dissolution of that firm is part of the proceedings, and the respondent also has a history of failing to comply with peer review requirements. I'm requesting authorization for formal hearing and civil penalty in the amount of $3,000 for violation of the termination from peer review program and for failure to cooperate.
You know what the 2012 civil penalty was? Was it for failure to obtain peer review as well?
Yes, it was.
Third.
All of the prior violations related to some peer review violation.
Third strike. I'm interested in what y'all think because y'all do this every day. Y'all have to do this, comply with this.
I mean, that's.
So my recollection from the previous year or so is that we're doing the $3,000 because it costs roughly that, I think, to get peer reviewed. I may be messing this up a little bit, but the point is that we don't want them to be able to get off with a fine that's less than the peer
This
review
fine
fees.
is way less than what it would cost.
So
Depends on if you're having a system review or an engagement review.
Yeah. I mean, that's historically what we've been saying is we don't want to set up a perverse incentive. But those are usually one-time, first-time offenses, right?
Yes.
This is the
repeat
third that we know of. So,
and he said he wasn't doing the work, but he had up till 17 is what it looks like. Is that right?
Yeah, that was based on his response when he renewed his firm permit. We did not have any definitive proof that he had done attest engagements, but up until his 17 renewal, he said that he was doing attest work.
I know this is something you willed very carefully, but I mean, it seems to me like we're getting into the protecting the public issue here. And so the question in my mind is, do we even offer to settle this, or do we set a hearing for revocation of the license and let him come prove that he needs not to lose it?
I like that idea better because I think this is egregious.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only one I've seen where we've had 3 failures to enroll in peer review that I can remember in the time I've been on the board. Any
That'd be
thoughts?
the only thing that gets his attention.
Any thoughts? Wendy, do you have a thought?
Well, so my thought is the last sentence of the explanation. So my concern here is that I foresee that this person's going to close the license anyway. So I'm wondering, does that really we had talked internally about opening a complaint against the practitioner as well, which we had not done initially. Now that, because of the divorce proceedings, it sounds like, and this individual's done this before.
I guess all the more reason he should be here explaining to this board why he doesn't think these rules apply to him.
Yeah, my question is, if we initiate a hearing to revoke the license, my thought would be that y'all certainly won't let him close it because it's not in good standing, right?
I don't know. Can you speak to that? So if they authorize, what did you say?
If we tell you to go forward with a hearing to revoke his license, or her license, whoever this is, then in the next week, if they contact the staff, if the person contacts the staff asking to close it down, surely we wouldn't let them do that because it's not in good standing, right? And it's subject to a revocation action.
I would have to check on that. Typically, when it's submitted for closure, the board office does close it. We would still pursue the complaint.
But you're not required to close it, is what I'm saying, right?
No.
So that's a decision that we make, and so I would think the reasonable decision would be not to allow them to do it. So we have a property interest to attach the action to.
That could be, stated to the firm that they can't close because there's a pending complaint open, and they would resolve that.
3,000 is nothing. I mean, it's nothing. Enough benefit paying us $3,000.
This is against his firm.
Correct.
Why wouldn't it be against him as well? I mean, he's the practitioner.
Well, and Gabe and I had discussed this, I think going forward, because we've seen this happen a couple of times now, is whenever we have a situation like this, we'll open a complaint against the firm and the individual. Typically, because peer review is the firm requirement, we've just been opening against the firm. But I think this is now the third case where we see that the firm is just kind of going away, and then it's been hard to hold the folks accountable.
I'm asking this, could we instruct you to start a revocation action against the firm permit and also open a complaint against the individual's license?
Yes.
Would that be an acceptable outcome?
Would be very supportive of that. I mean, the multiple offenses are just not acceptable, and there needs to be some accountability.
We need to do that through a motion to amend this, or can we just do it all at once at the end? I'm the chair. It's maybe out of order. Can I make a motion? Okay. My motion is that on 12, we instruct the legal counsel to open a revocation hearing for the firm permit, and also to open an investigation or whatever the proceeding against the actual individual's license as well.
Are you needing a second?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, second.
Any discussion? It's weird doing the procedure on my own motion. This may actually violate. All right, we can then vote on them all at the end. All right, can we go to number 13 and 14?
Number 13, 2018009341, respondent 1, and 14, 2018009311. The respondent 2 is the firm. This complaint was referred by the U.S. Department of Labor regarding due professional care in the performance of an audit of an employee benefit plan. The allegation is the partner in charge and the engagement team may not have complied with the professional standards governing such engagements. The complaint was also received by the AICPA Professional Ethics Division, and based on a cooperative enforcement agreement with them, the board will defer this investigation until the conclusion of the AICPA's investigation, and the AICPA has agreed to provide its investigative material. The respondent has agreed to allow the release of the information and check on the status of the investigation by the board. and we have received written authorization from the respondent to do that. So my recommendation is to authorize litigation monitoring consent order for Respondent 1 and Respondent 2, the firm.
Questions? All right, seeing none, can we go to 15?
Case 15, 2017-046661. This case actually involved a CPE efficiency as well. Previously, this board assessed its typical penalty of the total hours as well as the $1,000 penalty. This respondent it's similar to one Shalina talked about. This is another CFO that was quite defiant about the need to fulfill CPE and requested that he be able to voluntarily revoke his own license rather than submit to the punishment. And so he's actually preemptively, I think I'm a little skeptical when people say that. So I went and had him execute an order saying that if you all accepted that, it will go into action today. And he has agreed to that and signed the revocation order. Sorry, I'm having allergies. So at this time, I was asking this board to change their original recommendation to allow the revocation of this license in lieu of the original penalties assessed.
Questions? Okay. So we need to vote. So by my list, we have 15 total. Number 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, and 15. We had no changes to the recommendations. So I will entertain, and note that number 1, when it was presented, Shalina actually had changed her recommendation. It wasn't because of us, and that recommendation was to put this to litigation monitoring. So we've got a motion to approve 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15 as recommended. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. So number 2, we had a recommended change, which I'm going to take as the form of a motion, that the recommendation on page 3 stops after the second sentence, which ends 2015 to 2016. Is there a second on that?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right. Same exact thing for number 5. Number 5, the recommendation, which I'm going to take as a motion, was to end after the second sentence, which ends 2015 to 2016. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
This is the one you all wanted some more research on, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Do you have more research or not?
I have a timeline of what Karen has found.
Thank you for catching that. I'm sorry. I've got a note down here, but
that's right. It was issued in October of '87. She expired in September of 2004. The license was closed in August of 2012 after receiving a letter advising her to either reinstate the expired license or close it. So she closed it. She reactivated a couple of months later in November of 2012. So that was the last time we saw CPE, was when she reactivated in November of 2012. And then after this particular audit, she went inactive in December of 17. So other than looking at her CPE when she reactivated, it does not appear she's ever come up for audit.
okay. Does that change anybody's thoughts about this? That'll be a consent order for $1,000 and completion of 52 CPE hours within 90 days.
This is the one where I was always, where I was also questioning whether we should give her 2 options. And not just in this case, but in a case where a person is obviously not going to benefit from the CPE. And I know sometimes that might be hard to evaluate, but I mean,
do you have a motion to amend it? Because I think it's a good idea.
I can make a motion. I'd kind of like to know what other people's thoughts are. Is that
that was one thing that when I brought that up, that if they aren't really going to be practicing, then more penalty.
I guess
makes
the
sense.
motion idea, I guess to define that is harder than you might think, because to say there are cases where we might give the respondent two choices if it was if it was obvious that the CPE was going to be of no benefit due to retirement.
So
It's complicated.
I think if we could do it on just this case, then that may help us in the future for guidance. It may make it easier.
Yeah, I can do that. In this case, I think I would like to make a motion that we that we give this person two options, one as stated, and the other would be a higher penalty, and I'm open to whatever that penalty might be, but $2,500 for no CPE. Excuse me.
Any comments or thoughts on that? It sounds good to me. What do y'all think?
I like that, and particularly if she's going to have an inactive license. I mean, it would be different to me if she were going to remain active, or he or she. So I think.
I'd just like to say we need to be careful here, because isn't this the one that's let the license lapse and then reactivated? Isn't that what you just said here a few minutes ago? So regardless of what she said here, she could be right back in the category of trying to reactivate her license next month. And here we've foregone a CPE in lieu of dollars, and I don't like that personally. I mean, plus I think you're beginning to, you're treating people differently. I mean, here she was licensed for this period. She had a CPE requirement. She didn't meet it, and we treat her just like everybody else. I mean, it ought to have some teeth in it. We shouldn't.
Yeah, you could go one step further though and say if she chooses option 2, pays the $2,500. That if she chooses to come back into the profession, that she would have to also.
Didn't we have something on consent agenda about close and flag? I mean, that could be an option, is we don't even specify what you have to do on CPE. We just flag it so that it maybe it's brought to our attention before y'all approve it if she or he reapplied. I don't know. I mean, I think Casey has a good point too. So
Don't you have to get the CPE if you go back active after being inactive anyway?
Yes, the requirement is 80 hours of technical CPE in the past 24 months.
But we don't know if they really did it unless it's audited. Is that correct?
Well, when you reactivate, we
Okay.
assess
Okay.
it certificate by certificate.
all right, so we got a motion. Second option, 2,500. Do we want to amend that at all, Larry?
Not based on that answer. I think if we verify that, it takes care of the clarification.
Still be missing those previous CPE hours, Larry. I mean, she's still, so to speak, getting by without doing some CPE hours. Pay dollars to do that, but she at that point is different from somebody else that we would have.
I think the reason you handle it differently is because she's stating that she's going out of business and retiring. So
Different than somebody says, I want to go inactive. By doing that, they're saying.
active to me means I'm going to go inactive for a while. I may come back though. Retire means retire.
But she may not retire. She's. I don't want to be argumentative or hard-headed about it. I just think we need to be careful here because we're trying to treat somebody differently. That I'm not sure we really need to do that. I mean, the additional dollars. To me, I'd rather she do what our rules say she should have done and just be done with it, and without regard to.
Question. We need to increase our penalty associated with it, because it seems like we're getting a lot of people who are just saying, if I get caught, I'll just pay the penalty. because $1,000, going out and getting CPE, I spend a whole lot more than $1,000 a year getting my CPE, and over a 2-year period at 80 hours, it'd be a whole lot cheaper to play the game. And I don't understand how people do that or even think that, but it seems like at 13% that we're getting a lot of people that are, and maybe there's not enough bite in our penalty. It's just a thought.
So just to make sure I'm clear, typically it's $1,000 plus all the deficient CPE plus a penalty CPE, right? So I see what you're saying, but I don't think it's just the penalty. I don't know that that's what you were assuming. But
well, I was just sitting there saying that then I just decided, hey, I'll just go inactive.
But then if you want to become active again, then don't you have to, you have to complete the regular CPE. I can't remember the rule about any outstanding penalty CPE. And I'm a little confused because I think we were saying a few minutes ago that if you had some penalty, it could be carried over into the next period. But
when you ask to reactivate, you have to submit your application plus 24 hours of technical CPE to do that. Now, it's very hard if she applies to reactivate. The staff doesn't know that she had a penalty last year or 2 years ago when that happened. So they're just treating everybody. I'm going to look for 80 hours of technical CPE. If she requests to do that, in the next 6 months, it could overlap what she's been required to do as part of the consent order. It's very hard to ensure she's done all of it. But I'm not sure if that's the question or not, but that's where that part is coming in. Yeah.
Let me say, it's good we're discussing this today because probably should have said this at the start of our meetings. We do have a formal hearing tomorrow, and it's my understanding that hearing could take a long time. And so we want to start in the morning with a goal of trying to complete all of the regular business by like 10:30. That would be an all-time record for us. So we need to minimize discussion tomorrow and do it today and kind of decide today if we can. So with that said, I'm going to be quiet and let us move on here. So
we got a motion on the floor. Is there an amendment to that, or is there a second or a withdrawal, I guess, is what we need to know. Mm-hmm. Those are our three options, as far as I understand. And my name is Roberts, so, Just kidding.
Moved or seconded the original motion, I would be willing to withdraw it in favor of consideration of Larry's alternative.
Would that mean you want to second Larry's alternative?
Well, I think we either have to deal with the alternative as an amendment to the main motion, or the main motion has to be dispatched, and then that would then become the next main motion if
Right. So if you withdrew your second to the original motion, it gets us off that. And then the question is,
right.
You may not have wanted to go so far as to also second Larry's motion, though, I guess, right? His alternative motion.
Yeah, I'm willing to second it for discussion. I think it's a fair point, and I also think Casey's made some very fair points. I think we're struggling as a board with a policy on what to do with these people that get caught in an audit and then say, I want out by going inactive. And I do think we need to put some thought around that, not necessarily today or tomorrow.
We could ask the staff to do that between meetings to help us with that. Okay, so we got withdraw the motion of the first motion. Withdraw the second of the first motion. Larry made a new motion. You seconded that. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amended recommendation on number 5, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
So for clarification, you are authorizing a formal hearing with authority to settle by consent order upon payment of $1,000 and completion of the CPE hours within 90 days, or the $2,500 civil penalty, and in the event the respondent reactivates, the respondent would have to submit the previous hours and the penalty hours.
That last part wasn't part of it. The last part, It was just
Just the
money.
penalty.
Yeah, and then the traditional 24 hours of technical CPE is what I think Larry said that would catch us if they reapplied. All right, number 6.
Is that not what you thought, Larry? Yeah, I'm good. Oh, okay.
Number 6, there we had discussion, and it was a technical change to the recommendation to spell out that it was 80 hours that were deficient that had to be done, plus 32 penalty hours, and then say that none of that 112 hours could be used for future. I'm going to take that as a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion second. Any other conversation? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Going down to number 10 and 11. This was the change here, the recommended change I'm going to take as a motion was to change the civil penalty amount from $1,500 to $3,000. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Number 12. So we already did number 12. We motioned second on that, and just for memory's sake, we need to vote on it. But the motion that was approved to change it, that we had a second was approved, was to change it to basically a 2-part penalty or 2-part recommendation. The first was to open a proceeding to revoke the firm permit, and also to open a proceeding against the individual's license. So that's what we've already voted on that amendment. So we need to approve that recommendation. So. I guess we say all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. And then we're done. I've got one on the legal report. I got one question, though, for number 12. The second to last paragraph says the respondent didn't provide consent for the TSCPA to release the peer review correspondence to us. I thought we had the ability, since we were the ones charged in statute to do that, even though we've delegated that to the TSCPA. It seems like in this instance, we've had this conversation before, that we don't have to get their consent. We can use it when they're under some type of investigation. I mean, we can't just go willy-nilly looking through stuff, but I thought we had this conversation. Maybe I'm misremembering.
No, it doesn't give TSCPA, so within the peer review standards, they have confidentiality. They can't just, even though we're the board, they can't give us information unless authorized by the firm. And the firm can give us information, but we try to verify that through the TSCPA. And in order to do that, we have to get the firm to authorize them to release status information about their situation.
It seems like we're putting the TSCPA in an awkward situation. I wonder if there's an opportunity to look to see that can the ASCPA standard, if that's what it is, be met by our contract. I'm assuming we have a formal agreement with TSCPA to do this. So how do we do that? Because the legislature said we're supposed to do peer review, but we don't, obviously.
Well, we are supposed to require it of our licensees.
I thought we were supposed to do it. We're not?
We can approve. We approve whatever group we want. We have approved through rule that is an acceptable program.
Okay, it seems like if there's an opportunity to alleviate the awkwardness for TSCPA, it'd be nice.
I know. We have talked about this between the parties of NASBA, AICPA, and the boards, and we have relayed to AICPA that this is still a struggle for boards to get the information that they would like. It's really outside of TSCPA's control because they're bound by the AICPA requirements.
Right.
So we are working on that. I hear you.
Okay. I was just looking for an opportunity to help them out. If we can't, that's good. All right, Mr. Chairman, finish. Thanks.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and only 5 minutes. We're running a little bit long, and we'll try to speed it up after the break. Thanks. The licensing committee over to its chairman, Larry Elmore.
Okay, I'd like to preface our discussion on these individual cases by just saying a few things first. And this is kind of an editorial, I guess. I'll make it short. it appears that the volume and the type of discussions that we're seeing on some of the requests for extension on the exam expiration section of certain sections has become almost as detailed and complicated as the legal, such that we're almost going to have to turn it over to legal to come up with some recommendations. And that may be an extreme example, but I think as we go through this, I would appreciate us all thinking as we go through these of some way that we can streamline this, because we're getting health issues, job-related issues, family issues, some of which are easy to verify, some which are not easy to verify, and some which really may not should even be entered into the equation. So maybe as we go through these, as we see the different examples that we have, it might be good if I would appreciate very much some other people's comments about how can we make this easier, because you almost have to, and I found myself, and I called Wendy and went through some of these with her, and I almost had to draw a timeline for each one of them and say, here's the dates and here's what happened, and then you have to put intent and attitude and those kind of things into it, not attitude, but what was going on in their life. So anyway, as we go through these, we can talk about some of that, but is anybody but me seeing this as a problem? Because it's gotten very complicated.
I got a couple comments.
I'm reconsidering my chairmanship on this committee. I don't know if that was
that's why Stephen passed it on.
Sucker.
Yeah, he had a big smile on his face. But anyway, were you going to say something?
I do. I really read these yesterday and was going through them, and and taking this in consideration with the fact that our CPE compliance issues are up, our peer review results are the problems are up, and then these. I'm not saying these aren't. These are just, to me, they're just bad excuses. I'm not saying they're unfortunate situations, but they're just not. My interpretation of the reason we have this, and it's growing, and it's just ramping up, and apparently it's either something we've done that we've opened this door, created a crack that people feel more comfortable now coming to the board and asking for extensions. But, I honestly never thought even about some of this stuff. Life's busy. But I think, in my opinion, what this is designed for is something that's happens to you that's completely out of your control, that causes you to basically physically not be able to take the test. You've got 18 months, and if you can't do this in 18 months, then honestly you may want to consider doing something else. That's just my blunt opinion, but I took these down, and I think that honestly there needs to be maybe some kind of criteria first to where they can be weeded out, because for me it's very clear of these 6 issues that, in my opinion, there's only 2 that qualify. And both of those are involving something that's completely out of their control, and it physically makes them unable to participate in the testing at their test site. I think one of them was requested after the expiration date, but it doesn't matter.
And I asked Wendy about that on the phone. I said, why are people asking for reinstatement after the expiration date? And she said, well, the board has been, and staff have been very reluctant to grant extensions before the date, because then you're not incentivized to do anything about it. So, and having said all this, I don't want us to appear at all to be unsympathetic to these issues. There are some very sad and very traumatic issues going on with these folks, and I don't want us to sound like we don't care or that we're not sympathetic to that. The question that I'm posing is, not question, but suggestion, is that we draw some guidelines that would be qualifying issues up front, or qualifying requirements up front, that would even get a person to the level of having the board address it. In other words, let's let the staff take some of these and just clear cut them and say that's not something the board needs to look at.
I think it's physically you're unable. Again, life's busy. We're all busy. There's nobody that works in the accounting industry or any other that's not busy. I mean, there's no good time. I mean, I remember trying to come up with an excuse. Well, I'm gonna wait. There's no good time. There's never a good time. And I think if you physically can't take it and something that caused it was out of your control, then to me, that's a pretty good criteria, I guess,
I think objective documentation is very important. So some of these had some medical documentation and some did not. But I know in dealing with exceptions in colleges, you have to submit medical documentation.
Well, let's just go into some of these, and I will try my best to save my voice so I can last through this. But Kevin and I are both. This is the infirmary over here. We're in Sudafed heaven.
Good thing you moved.
So.
I assume everybody on the committee has. I mean, I don't know if we need to go into all these in specific detail or great. You tell us, is that something? But I mean, if we've all read these, I mean, I don't know about rehashing. For me, it was it was extremely clear cut which ones I would approve and not. You want to try it that way, or
I'm open to whatever the board would like. Mr. Chairman, do you have a preference on that? I have a very short synopsis of each one of them that I can try to do that with, and
I would try to keep it short, but I think you've got to talk about them individually here in this committee meeting and just see if we can do it quickly. If not, we'll have to discuss them in more detail.
First one is Thomas. Let's just call him Thomas. He had, and Wendy, you helped me on this because the exception that we have automatically qualified people for is if in the second quarter of 17 the delay in the grading of the exam or the new requirements for the exam, they had something expiring in the third quarter that affected them.
Right, so if they sat in the second quarter of 2017 when the new exam launched, if they sat during that window and had one or more parts expiring in the third window, we granted them an extension of one window. This individual did not have those specifics.
This individual did not qualify for the automatic, for that particular case. He brings up the fact that the waiting period for 16 and 17 negatively affected his chances of passing the exam. He wound up losing BEC in February of 18. Now, there's a bunch of discrepancies here on these dates on this one, which the ones that are written in there on your paper are Wendy and her staff provided actual dates. We're not sure where those other dates came from. But then the crux of the matter down in the very end gets into the fact that he was working 10 to 20 hours overtime, worked for the state government audit on single audits. His mother was not a U.S. citizen, and she visited from Europe for almost circumstances. It was almost impossible to focus on FAR during this quarter. But then, unless I'm missing something, he chose not to sit at all in the fourth quarter of 17 for anything. And is that right, Wendy? He didn't sit.
That's correct, because if he had sat, it would have shown what the score was on the score report. So,
and so if you read between the lines, the reason that he did not sit during the fourth quarter was working extra hours and then taking care of his mother. And then there's also a marital issue that almost ended in divorce. So that's pretty much the short story on that one. Is anybody thoughts on that?
Wait, we going to vote on these individually, or?
You want to do them as we go, Casey?
I would make a motion to deny this request.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of denying the request, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Second one is Mark Dameron. This is one where there was an adoption of children from Uganda in 2012. He discusses some issues in 2015. He had a father-in-law who had a traumatic brain injury in March of 17. And then this is the one, Wendy, where we got a delay in receiving some of the information.
No, that's not this one. I think the crux of this request is that when the father-in-law became ill, that they were guardianship or had power of attorney and had to care for him in addition to their several children that they have, and he just didn't have the time to devote.
This one had a long history of issues, and so I never could really get my arms around, going back that far to 2012, talking about the adoption of 3 children. And I understand that adoption of 2 children from Uganda would require a lot of time, but that was, 6 years ago. Had the second quarter to sit in order to keep from losing this, but he did not. That's correct, isn't it, Wendy? He did not sit in the second quarter. He lost this credit, or he will lose it, May 31 of 18.
Correct. I think that he indicated that he would have time to study during the summer months because his kids were not in school. So this is one where he's asking actually before the expiration date. So he's going to lose audit on 5/31, but he has 2 parts he still needs to pass, FAR and Reg.
Not sit second quarter.
Yeah, yeah.
And possibly third.
Yeah, I pulled this score report from NASBA on April 17th. So as of that date, he had, no scores in. This isn't going to show whether he's scheduled to sit or not. Sorry.
Another thing I meant to ask Wendy to do is, you quoted to me the standard to go by on what should produce an extension. If you would read that, yeah.
The board may in particular cases extend the term of conditional credit, notwithstanding the requirements of these rules, upon a showing that the credit was lost by reason of circumstances beyond the candidate's control.
Make a motion that we deny this request.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Number 3 is Hendricks. This one, I think, is a pretty extreme case of bad circumstances that this person went through. After having read through this discussion, he lost basically a year of his life because of this auto accident and lost the ability to function in a lot of ways other than just being able to take the CPA exam. I had asked you to get a little more information on this. Were you able to find out whether May of 2018, where there was any activity?
I apologize, Larry. I didn't get that.
That's fine.
Sorry.
It may not make a difference. We were curious as to whether anything happened in May of 18.
Yeah, because he's requesting an extension until June 30, which, if you all were to approve this, gives him a very limited time to schedule and sit for 2 parts. And so I think you and I were talking about whether that's an appropriate, if you decided this was worthy of extension, if June 30 was really a good date.
Thank you for reminding me of that. We were actually talking, Wendy and I were, that if this were to be approved, should it be for a longer period of time than what he's asked for? Because it doesn't give him a whole lot of time. Thoughts on that?
I think this is, to me, is a clear-cut case that complies with our rule there that you read. It's out of his control, but it physically made him unable to do it. So, are you thinking like August the 30th, like additional 2 months, or?
Well, he's asking for June 30. I think, in my mind, I was thinking September 30.
If you want to speak,
I make a motion that we extend his ability to take the exams through September 30th.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion?
And just for the record, I know I didn't include all of this medical stuff in your information. I was just hesitant to include, but he provided extensive detail from the doctor with dates, timelines, X-rays, police reports. I mean, there's certainly documentation of this entire event.
Moving along, the next one is William Hepner.
Larry, I think y'all need to vote, since
Oh,
you voted
did
on
we
the,
not-
you
did
did
we
the
not vote?
motions, but no vote.
Okay. Motion to approve this one through September 30th of 18. We had a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next one is William Hepner. The circumstances around this one relate to Hurricane Harvey. He was not able to take the exam. Testing center was closed due to Hurricane Harvey, which hit Houston on August 25th, 17, and was unable to schedule the test due to the aftermath of the hurricane. Now, he throws in a secondary reason about his current audit engagement demands 100-hour work weeks with no days off. I think he has a good reason here without that, but work schedules are not something I think should be part of the discussion. I just don't.
Agree with you. Let me a quick question. What he's in Texas, but why is he Tennessee? Why is Tennessee's jurisdiction? Is he from here, or I couldn't figure that out.
You know, it happens a lot, Stephen, and for this particular example, I don't know. He may have gone to school here, and now he's in Texas.
Taking it in Texas at the same center.
He actually goes and takes it at a center there, but he applied under our jurisdiction and our education requirements. So you can, if you're sitting in Tennessee, you can apply under Alaska if you want to. So it's an odd thing, but that's the way it works. So he is physically in Texas taking the exam at one of those testing centers. I did verify that it was closed and that it was actually closed an extended period of time due to the hurricane.
While I wish that second excuse wasn't on there, because I think the first one is that's clearly qualifies, I would make a motion to grant his extension request as stated.
Can I clarify before we go to?
Sure.
He requests actually originally requested a 3-month extension on both BEC and audit. In my follow-up email to him, I suggested that the board may not be interested in extending the audit because it doesn't expire until December of 18.
I didn't catch I just saw BEC.
So if you will be clear in your motion as to which section and what extended period you're willing to give.
So I'll amend my motion to say that we would make a motion to grant the extension of his BEC credit for an additional 3 months. I guess that extends it to June 30th, 2018.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
I didn't hear too many ayes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next is Wafa Hendaye. Passed in June of 16, passed far. This is one where it's an abusive relationship is the reason given. Plus a grandfather that passed away and has affected her emotional state. Very close to passing the last 2 times with 74 and 72, and she's asking for an extension of FAR to March 31 of 18 so that, and this one is very unusual, I guess, in that if we grant this request, she's done because she's already passed all the parts of the exam. It's just that she has lost FAR as of 12/31/17. So her request is that expiration not be in effect, so that now that she's passed audit in March of 18, she will have completed parts and they'll all be good. So she has obviously shown a very successful record of passing the exam. So the question is, do we want to grant that request in order for her to have completed all 4 sections, or do we want her to take FAR again? Because it has now expired.
What kind of, did she submit anything in addition to
This
her
is one
request?
where an abusive relationship is one that you talking about early on, just in general. Now, I'm not talking about this case, but just in general, there are a lot of things that are hard to verify and hard to substantiate. Now, she may have documentation or whatever, I don't know, but
I think she submitted, if I remember correctly without my computer, she verified the divorce, obviously with the divorce decree, and I think the passing of her grandfather, she provided that.
What was the timeline? So it looks like her divorce was final by the end of 2016. When did the grandfather die?
she says in that same, she said in the same year of 16.
All 2016.
Yeah.
She started sitting for the exam after she left her house. So, I mean, I mean, again, I'm not trying to downplay this because they're all tough situations, but I mean, life is tough, and I just don't, not trying to
Well, I certainly
be a jerk, but
I sound like an insensitive mother, but talking about being a mother to a toddler and working full time, we can't let that become our standard, or else
It
we
applies
would
to a
owe
lot
that
of
to
people.
everybody, male and female. So I do think we need to be very clear the criteria we're using or not using in this.
I guess my opinion on this would be there was, again, not downplaying the circumstances, but I just don't see anything in here that would have not allowed her to take the exam. I mean, she was able to take the exam.
If she had left her home in the middle of all this, I might have considered it different. Time frame along with the vagueness of the information concerns me.
I would make a motion to deny the request.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on this one?
Aye.
Okay, the next one is Amy Hussey. This one is, from what I can tell, totally work-related. Other than child with special, well, I'll take that back. This one has 2 issues. My note had concentrated on the work-related, but there was another very serious issue, too, with a child with special needs, trying to incorporate him with the special education class into general education. Time-consuming, hard work was successful, and reports some success in accomplishing some goals there. But then there was a delay in the release of the scores of BEC. Took 4 months to receive the scores, and she did not sit any during the first quarter of March 31. And so if you look over to the chart that shows what she's getting ready to lose, or she did lose reg in December of 17. So she has passed audit, passed BEC, and has also passed reg, but she's getting ready to lose it. So the one circumstance I think here that should be considered is that she's had all of 18 to date to retake some of these, but she has not.
I'll make a motion to deny the request.
I second that emotion.
Discussion. Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
So just to clarify, I sent 2 additional out yesterday. And I received one over the weekend and one Tuesday night. Is that when I sent them out yesterday? Yeah. So there were 2 additional I added to the agenda.
Got to get those.
Does everybody feel comfortable talking about them that's on the committee? Okay. I just want to make sure because it wasn't on the original agenda.
Okay, let's call this next one Heather. She had a problem pregnancy, early delivery, delivered a daughter early, had an extensive period of recovery from delivering the baby as well as getting an infection that was resulted from that. Work with a large healthcare company. She's requesting
Unable to take the 4th and final test section as planned on January of 18.
She's requesting an extension on audit and BEC that expired on February 28th of 18. She's requesting a 6-month extension on both until August 31st of 18. It's past FAR as well.
I'm not on the committee, but quick question. Did it say that her child was in the NICU for a period of time? If they had to deliver it early?
No.
It's stillborn, didn't it?
I'm sorry?
Didn't it say it was stillborn?
By being born.
Yeah.
Oh.
That she was having to recover.
Okay, I'm on a different one. Sorry, I had the wrong one in front of me. That's why I was confused. Sorry, I read the wrong thing to you then.
Related to pregnancy.
Heather.
I apologize for confusing y'all. Okay, so she had FAR expired in January 31st of 18. She's looking to get an extension until August. So from January 31 to August for FAR. She needs to extend that so that she can sit for BEC.
Talking 3 months from now, right?
3 months from now, it would be 7-month extension.
When was the delivery?
October. So she was essentially out of work from October, November, December. So she was out for a window.
I mean, again, I think this is one of those circumstances that, I mean, it's a death. And then she has a physical...
And she couldn't work.
A serious illness, as her physician said. So, I mean, I guess my opinion on that is something that's out of her control that makes her unable to do this.
I can't imagine trying to recover from the death of a child.
And then you're fighting for your own health, too. I would make a motion that we grant this extension as stated for the, I don't have it, which 2 sections were they again?
No, I was wrong in my first one. So that you would be authorizing an extension for FAR, which expired on January 31st. You'd be granting an extension till August 31st.
Okay, so
I grant the extension for FAR to August 31st, 2018.
Is that all she's asking for, Wendy?
Yes, because that gives her a chance to sit for BEC, which she has not had an opportunity to sit for. She's passed all three parts other than that.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second? Okay. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the last one was another one that just came in, I guess yesterday maybe. Ferrari, we're going to call this person Ferrari. Ferrari Rusticari, requesting a 6-month extension to retake REG as well as reinstatement of the 2 expired credits auditing and BEC. So on August 16th, he passed 2 parts, got married in December of 16, or she, I think it's a she. She passed in 2 parts in August, got married in December, traveled to Zimbabwe in August for a visa extension, learned in February of 17 that she was pregnant, and in October of 17 gave birth of 17. So there's a gap here that I was curious about from August to December of 16. December of from August, December of 16, there was no activity as far as taking the exam. Is that right? From the point she passed the 2 parts and then got married, there was a gap there.
I believe you're correct.
This is where I'm talking about. You almost have to have a timeline and draw a picture. But
Any documentation for medical or anything like that? I mean,
So we do. So when she went to the emergency room, we have that documentation, but we have nothing from her overall OBGYN that it was a long-term. Her pregnancy was an issue. We had an emergency room visit where they stated that that was what was provided.
which can be a normal thing. I don't feel right. That's where my wife sends patients to go to the emergency room if you think you're bad, and then they send them home. I mean, I'm just saying generally. I guess I just don't see anything that, again, trying to keep consistent on what we've been saying, I just don't see that this meets those criteria. So, I mean, I would make a motion to deny the request.
If there's any reason why the stuff on your iPads does have a better timeline, if you would rather wait till tomorrow, if some of you feel more comfortable seeing a timeline, you would have that on the iPads tomorrow. I don't know.
I think I would like to see the timeline tomorrow.
I'll let my motion stand unless if nobody wants a second, that's fine. I just don't think a timeline would affect my excuse. The reason is the reason, regardless of when it happened. Happened on the day of the test.
Well, and she talks about not scheduling. Can I discuss when there's talks about not scheduling exams because of her schedule, the travel schedule and all that? I don't think we would see as extenuating circumstances. And
I don't think there's good documentation here to support what she's saying. I don't think she submitted the documentation
and a lot of it's
necessary.
travel, et cetera, which I don't see as extenuating. And then she talks about being. Those aren't the things. The things would be medical, in my view, if that's. And even when she mentions the problem her child had, she said that required an extra week, I think, of going to the doctor. So I'm like Stephen, I don't see anything that was directly resulting in the delay.
Well, she mentions also that the wedding coming up in December required a lot of planning time, but people all
Don't
the
give
time that take the
extensions for
exam when they're
weddings.
getting married and planning to get married. Second the motion as chairman? Okay, I'll second Stephen's motion. Question? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That's all of the extension requests, right?
I got another one last night.
No.
You
We'll talk about that one in July.
in July.
Got a couple that were sent directly to me.
Okay. The next two items are unrelated to extension requests. We have a request to approve classes taken at Lone Star as upper level courses that would and just to cut to the chase here, Wendy has informed me that we have previously approved courses of this type where the Texas State Board has approved those that we reciprocated with their opinion and approved them also. And in looking at these, actually, they appear to be courses that would be upper level. Now, did we check with you on what your thoughts were on this?
Wendy did contact me. And at most schools, you cannot transfer in a course from a two-year college and count it as upper division. There is a clear distinction. Texas, as I pointed out, is usually very strict about their requirements, but they have a blanket policy that for this purpose, for counting toward the hours for the certificate, you can count community college courses. My initial response was negative, but then Wendy said the board had approved a blanket statement that we do comply with the Texas exception. And I think, for one thing, I think it's a difference in how state community colleges operate and the role that they play, perhaps. So anyway, it would not satisfy upper division requirements at a four-year college in Tennessee generally, but to my knowledge. But the question, as I see it, is: are we going to make an exception because this was taken under the guidelines set by Texas?
Let me add a question or clarification. I didn't understand. So, okay, this email we have from Gabriel Crosby is saying that it's considered to be upper level classes. However, the school didn't, and this person works at the school. She's the registrar, whatever, the one that decides, I guess, but then didn't decide to do it. So if it was okay, why didn't they accept it? To me, it was just, I just can't understand. I can't wrap my head around that.
Wait, why didn't who?
It qualifies, but the school's not going to allow it.
So they must have a similar restriction where they can't bring in those hours and include them as upper division on their transcript. So that's the real issue here, is that the school where she got her master's from would not include those, but
the state would approve them to count toward
right.
And the person at the school said it was okay.
Right, but the person at the school, said they consider it okay because the board has said it's okay.
So then the person's saying that their policy's wrong in theory, because if they're saying it's okay to hours, but yet we don't accept it, to me, that's just kind of, you're contradicting yourself.
And from this board perspective, they don't accept all community colleges. I think they only have four.
They have to be approved.
They have to be approved by the board, and I think there's only
Could be some politics there.
A handful there, and Lone Star happens to be one of them that is approved.
Right, so remind us of the Tennessee policy.
So in Tennessee, we do not accept community college as upper division. We've had a few instances, which the last page of the document that I've sent you, where the board has considered similar matters. We've denied some and approved some. We found, Karen researched back the minutes of the board meeting, and we found in 2012 that the board did approve the the acceptance of community college credits from Texas to meet the upper division requirement. So it was a similar request, and the board did approve it at that time. Because it was so long ago, we decided to bring it back, and it was a specific situation like this one, Pam, so it wasn't a policy necessarily that they enacted at that time.
It's such a weird regulation in my view. I mean, I'm shocked that Texas has approved this because, for example, they prohibit online courses from counting toward certain of the requirements for certification. There's just a list of things they don't accept, and then they do accept this. So I don't like going down that path because we have specified certain things need to be upper division. But I think the question is, will we, because this person took it with the understanding of Texas law? That's the only reason I can see to do it.
I took this is a special program that Texas did to accommodate our profession and the needs of a lot of students out there, I guess. And it looked to me like the title of the courses and the content would really be upper division courses. I mean, you might question whether the teaching methods or classroom work is as rigorous as you would have in a four-year college, but apparently Texas put a lot of thought into it and have, I would assume the community colleges have to go through some kind of application and approval process to get approved under this thing. But I guess when I looked at it and based on our prior, I guess, approval of similar things, I felt like.
And I think that is the question. Are these different from a lot of two-year college courses? You will find intermediate accounting, or at least used to. You would find intermediate accounting, for example, at community colleges in Tennessee. But if that student took intermediate at a community college and then went to University of Memphis, they would have to retake intermediate accounting. Now, I'm sure, it may have been just as good a course, but the system did not allow it. And now I think that usually community colleges are not allowed to teach a course that would have that numbering and that title to avoid confusion. Because it was sad when a student came in and they thought that they had fulfilled certain requirements. So the question is, are these different, and do we want to, or the Texas regulations? I have mixed feelings. I really do.
Was it the Texas State Board or the University of Texas that approved it?
Texas State Board has approved certain community colleges to offer courses that would meet the requirements to obtain your license. And they have like a certificate program.
But Lone Star didn't recognize these as upper level when they transferred in, correct?
Lone Star is the community college. Prairie View did not.
I'm sorry, Prairie View, yes.
Right. Prairie View did not accept them via a transcript.
So if they were
but they accepted
legit,
them into the program.
Why wouldn't they accept them?
Accreditation. Accreditation would not let you
and that's a big
transfer
deal.
those in.
But the board approves it and allows them to get a certificate.
The board would approve them to get a certificate. I think this person's other option, I don't know the background of this person. I'm not sure why she's applying under Tennessee jurisdiction, but she could also apply to me under Texas jurisdiction. So I don't think that if you choose to deny for some reason that she just can't get a license. I mean, I'm not sure why. There may be more to the story that I don't know, but
to be consistent with our rules, I mean, I think I don't see why we would approve this. I mean, I would make a motion to deny the request because it's not compliant with our rules.
Said that in the past we have.
We had a similar request in 2012. At that time, it appears we did.
Are we obligated to follow precedent?
Different board.
probably only 2 people here that were on the board at that time. Yeah, there's no requirement.
I mean, she can, like you said, she can go apply under Texas law, and then the courses would count, correct?
Maybe avoiding they have some pretty strict requirements. Otherwise, maybe that she's got those, which is not our concern, but every state is different.
Not on the committee, but the thing that's troubling me is the fact that the Texas Board of Accountancy has apparently officially sanctioned this institution as one that provides acceptable coursework to them. And I realize that's not us, but I'm trying to say if I were, if the shoe was on the other foot, I mean, would I want somebody just, ignoring what the Tennessee Board, in its wisdom collected, since we don't otherwise know anything about Lone Star's program other than that it's apparently passed muster with their board.
We're preserving our rules, not theirs.
True, but I mean, they are, no question about it. It's really a question of how much deference, you want to allow.
I feel like that would.
And also, let's say that, ultimately, wherever she gets licensed, she can then reciprocate to this state, assuming she has an active license in another state, without us reviewing all of this information.
But Texas would not say, well, Tennessee allows online courses, so therefore she took online courses in Tennessee, and we should let them count in Texas. I mean, they're going to uphold their standards, so
that's what we're charged to do. We're here to follow our rules and enforce our rules and protect the public against rule breakers, and that's kind of where I am on this.
So, Wendy, your point is, if we turn her down, then she can go to Texas, get her license there, and then reciprocate.
Right. I mean, I absolutely see both sides of it. I think it's a hard issue.
Motion, don't we? Do we have a motion to deny?
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of denying this request to qualify these courses as upper division, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Last item we have is Carla Smith asking for us to approve the taking of the Government Finance Officers Association Certified Public Finance Officer Program as qualifying for. I'm somewhat familiar with this program. It is a pretty rigorous exam. It is a program to qualify for, so to be consistent with other certifications that we have approved, I would be fine with that, but I'm open to discussion. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I agree with you. What would this be classified as, general, or?
You can qualify it for whatever you want to. If you.
What is she? Is she asking for anything specific? Let's see.
No.
And we don't have specific hours.
We typically will count it as a technical or a non-technical.
3.5 hour exam, so I assume we would.
Well, there are several.
Each exam would be based on their hours. Is that
right? So governmental accounting and auditing, I think that's clear where that would fall. Retirement benefits, risk management, procurement, debt management, operating and capital budgeting. Are you comfortable with all that being under technical? Debt management? Not.
I don't debt management.
I'd be fine.
Pretty serious. I mean, these are pretty like you said, there's pretty strenuous exams, and I think they're very technical in nature, subject.
Yeah,
this is among the more rigorous
Yes,
of those types of programs. I agree with Larry. It's a well-credentialed and sought and hard-fought program to pass.
I would make a motion that we approve this series of exams as
under specialized knowledge is a technical subject now.
Yes, that's where and then the hours would be based on the hours of the exam.
Right. The rule reads that it's 5 times the length of each exam.
Okay.
So it's an easy calculation.
Okay. There's my motion. Is that clear enough?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this as qualified CPE in the state of Tennessee. All those in favor, aye. Any opposed? Okay.
That brings us to the Rules Committee, and we'll turn that over to our chair.
Well, we are revisiting CPE and trying to be more consistent with NASBA's definitions of technical, non-technical. And Wendy, you've made some comments. Some of these I don't understand exactly, but you want to give us your update on where we are?
I will try to walk through these, and feel free to ask questions along the way if you want. I think I have 2 questions for you all as we go through it. Again, the purpose of making some updates to the CPE rules are to define technical hours, what that means, and align it with the new fields of study. Add new delivery methods, nano learning, blended learning. And then there are new CPE model rules, so where it's appropriate to add language or modernize our rules so that they keep in line with those model rules, and therefore consistency across the country, hopefully. So the document you have, in general, the red is my added commentary. So on the first page, you'll see I added in the definition section, define technical fields of study. This is from the model rules. In C is the technical fields, in D is non-technical fields. And we're not limited to those because, as you'll see, it says they include but are not limited to the following, so they can be changed and not affect the rules too much. I then go on to define blended learning program, group program, an independent study, nano learning, and self-study. And those all come from the model rules or the CPE standards. I will stop for a second and let you know that I sent these to NASBA for their input. I had 3 people review them from NASBA and give input. I also shared them with TSCPA for their input. So I've tried to get various folks to chime in since these are extensive. On page 2, we get into basic requirements. I simply removed our prior definition of technical fields of study and put it with our new terminology there. Under 1E, let's see, what did I do here? Okay, this is clarifying that if you are using carry forward hours, that you must submit the certificates for that prior period and not just a listing of the CPE that you took. So this has been practice. We have done this before. It just wasn't clear that that was required. So we're just trying to clarify what we already do in practice.
So if somebody had 88 hours in their previous prior, and they were going to carry over 8, do they send the certificates for all 88 hours? So that they have proved that they do, or
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's
it's a lot, but yes.
Yes. All right. That's what I wanted to make sure that's
yeah
what we were meaning.
We do not have a huge amount of people that use carryover, so it's a lower percentage than I thought would. Okay, in 2 of that section, again, I'm just replacing our prior technical requirement with the new definition, technical fields of study.
I had my confusion, Wendy.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so in 1E, we allow for folks to have carryover hours if they had a full reporting period. Okay, 1E allows for that. It does not speak to if you are a new licensee and let's say you're a new licensee and you have the requirement of taking 40 hours, 20 hours technical for your first reporting period. So let's say you got more than that. So your next reporting period, there is no provision to allow you to carry over those extra hours that you may have gotten right now, because we only allow carry forward for somebody who's done a full 2 years. So if you're a new licensee and you get licensed with us right now, and you are set to renew in 2019, so not till the end of next year, you're going to have a 40-hour requirement, 20 hours technical. Let's say that person gets more than that. They don't have an option to carry that over to the following reporting period. Do you want that? That's not been in here before, but it is a question that comes up, I've been advised.
Okay.
And we can leave it the way it is, and if they need a two-year reporting period before they are eligible for carryover. Or we can add some language that would allow carry forward for a new licensee.
Something that I was confused about.
And it's better sense now? Or?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So, thoughts, suggestions from the committee, anybody? Because most of those folks are, if they're at a CPA firm, their quality control document is going to require them 40 hours a year, regardless if they're licensed. So I would think this happens fairly often, particularly for those in public practice.
Is there a reason for not allowing a new licensee to carry it forward? Is there a good reason for that? Because I guess I don't understand why it would be.
I'm not sure that I can think of one, and it may just not have been thought of when this was initially put in place, and it was thought that it was covering everyone, and it really doesn't, the way it's worded.
Not to allow it either, if they've earned the hours. I would be in favor of allowing that carry forward.
I'll make a motion that or do we do that now?
The committee does to make well, how is this going to work?
We're going to do the whole document, or?
So my plan is for you all to review this and provide your specific comments for a final draft at the next meeting for voting. And so at the end, maybe we can get a motion to accept this draft rule with these provisions, and we'll come back with a final draft at the next meeting. So I would note that, and then we'll wait till the end.
Any other comments on the carryover possibility for the new licensees? Okay.
Okay, I think that's it for that page. I just added technical fields of study, replaced our prior definition there. Okay, so I'm on to page 3, and then on F on that page, technical fields of study, again, replace areas of accounting, ethics, attest, tax, etc. Then we go to number 4. Licensees who surrender their licenses in good standing may reactivate a license by complying with the requirements of the rule just above that. It previously said this subsection, and we had always had them comply with letter F above that, but it wasn't really clear what subsection it was that was being referred to. So we're just adding that clarification. Does that make sense? Number 5, upon application supported by evidence as the board may require licensees. We took the age 70 and over out because we've changed the statute, and I'll explain to you in a minute how we're addressing that below. But this section will apply to those that are disabled for more than 6 months or active military may be exempted from payment of a license fee or CPE requirements as long as they do not practice or offer accounting services to the public. So this might make more sense in a minute. The number 6 is again replacing our old technical requirement with technical fields of study. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so to further explain number 5, where I took out age 70 and over, if you will look above there in E, it says a certificate holder who is 65 years old or older and possesses a certificate in inactive status will not be required to pay the license fee required of licensees as set forth in these rules. So I think that takes care of, that's why I took out the 70. The statute changed, we changed it to 65. So it doesn't need to be in number 5 any longer, correct? Right. And I know number 5 says they're exempted from CPE and a renewal fee, but in E above, you're stating that a 65-year-old who has a certificate in inactive status, which by being in active status, you're exempted from CPE. So it's inherent in the status of the license. Okay, so that's it for that section. Now I'm down to qualifying programs 20-5-.04. Okay, so this is where I started to add and update some wording from the model rules to help make it a little more consistent. So in number 1 there, I just reworded it to comply with the model rules, which in essence took our A that was there and combined it into number 1. Now, we got kind of hung up on the word directly. So wording from the model rules essentially combines 1 and 1A. There's some discussion about whether the word directly disallows non-technical subjects. So directly is in the model rules, so I didn't think much about it. But when you go back to the definition of a non-technical subject, we say that it contributes to the maintenance and or improvement of the competence of a CPA in areas that are indirectly related to the field of business. So NASBA just wanted to make sure that we didn't inadvertently disallow non-technical subjects. Is anyone following me? Are you following me?
If we took out directly, contributes and just said contributes to the licensees.
That's what I was going to suggest we do. I just wanted to get, since it was different than model rules, I just thought that was the easiest way to deal with it, just to make sure there was no problem interpreting it.
But NASBA found the inconsistency
in their
own. Okay, so maybe they're going to change that. But I agree. I would not want to leave directly in there if that's going to jeopardize certain CPE qualifying, and then we have a mess.
Yeah. Okay, so the final version will not include the word directly. Okay, number 2 there, we just dealt with number 1. Number 2, the following learning activities shall qualify for CPE credit. And then I start to list learning activities that comply with the standards jointly approved by NASBA and the AICPA. It's coordinated and presented by a qualifying program sponsor as set forth in the above Rule 25-.05. And this is where I start to list out group programs, self-study, blended, nano, and this is just to help make it clear to the licensee that these delivery methods are accepted. CPE as a technical reviewer for number 6 there is new. So a technical reviewer would be when, what's a CPE provider? Kaplan, let's just say, offers Smart Pros, I think is the name of something like that. When they offer a course, create a course, a technical reviewer has to review what the author came up with in the program. So those people that review that would be able to get CPE for doing that. That's what the technical reviewer CPE is. And so we are adding that as a new option. That is from model rules. Okay, B, C, D, and E, we've had all those before. I just moved them from below up to this section because that's how it's done in model rules. So it doesn't change anything. It's still that you can still get CPE from a college or university. You can still get CPE from work on a technical committee. You can still get it from an in-firm or in-house program or other programs recognized by the board. So the essence of what I did here doesn't change. It's just moving its place and using updated wording. Number 3, I left intact, or number 2, that now becomes 3. And number 3 is where I deleted. Those are the items that basically just moved up that I just talked about. Okay, at the bottom of this page, this is the section that talks about us allowing self-study. So formal correspondence or other, it used to be individual study programs. I've just updated that to self-study because that's the terminology that's used, and that is what I defined. Including those administered via computer, which require registration, provide evidence of satisfactory completion, may qualify for continuing education credit. I deleted or suggested deleting the number of credit hours of continuing education will be determined by the board because we don't do that. We require it be QAS or that group determines what the hours are going to be. I removed such programs taken after January 1 of 99 because that was a very long time ago. So I just revised that by saying such programs, excluding those offered by the AICPA and state CPA societies, must be approved by the board or its designee. The quality assurance program doesn't exist anymore. It's been wrapped into NASBA's National Registry of CPE sponsors, so they suggested I update that wording. And just to be clear, this means that a self-study program has to be provided by someone registered with NASBA, AICPA, or any state CPA society. That means a firm an exempt sponsor can't offer self-study. They can offer live, but they can't offer self-study. And that's been the way it's been. We're not changing anything, but just confirming.
It does not limit the number of self-study courses, is that okay?
That is correct. And I did not recommend that change, although the model rules does call for a limit. Okay, on the next page. Continuing education will be allowed for service as an instructor. I added developer here because sometimes you develop a course but you don't turn around and instruct it. And when we just used the terminology instructor, we didn't know what to do with the person who developed the course. So, and this comes from model rules. Let's see. Okay, so I also changed the terminology and how they compute that time that they earn, because if you're an instructor and a developer, you would get 3 times credit. But if you're just one or the other, you would get 2 times the time you prepare plus the time you instruct. So it separates it. That's the reason for the update of that wording. So the instructor-developer may receive CPE credit for the actual preparation time up to 2 times the number of CPE credits in which participants would be entitled, in addition to the time for presentation. So if you're the developer and the presenter, you get the full 3 times like we had talked about before, or that was in our rules before. Okay, the new number 5. This is been here before. I just clarified what acceptable evidence would be, and I pulled that from the model rules. Now we're going to go down to, okay, if you're confused over the new number 8 there, that looks like it's in purple, those are rules that are going to be effective the end of this month. They're a previous rule that this board approved, and it deals with allowing a licensee 16 hours of credit from a non-registered sponsor if approved by the board prior to attending that course. Okay, number 10, acceptable evidence for completion of qualifying learning programs. So this helps explain to the candidate what they need to provide. Before, we didn't have anything but saying you need to provide a certificate. And in some instances, there may not be a certificate, so we gave a little bit of an option here. So in A, we talk about any of the programs from 2A and B. which would be at the top of this page, a college or university or any of these group programs, self-study, blended learning, nano learning, etc., would require a certificate of completion or transcript issued by the qualifying CPE sponsor. So if you're at a college or university, you have to get a transcript. If you're at any other program, you get a certificate. For programs or courses set forth in 20-5-.042D and 2E, acceptable evidence should include a certificate of attendance supplied by the program sponsor. The model rules suggest that we would accept other verification. Now, this is related to infirm. This is related to infirm programs. Okay, we've always required a certificate from an infirm program. And so NASBA was suggesting that we could have some other kind of verification if the firm couldn't produce a transcript. We've never had a problem with that, so I did not suggest allowing for other types of verification. If you all think differently, you can let me know. C is acceptable evidence would include certificate of completion supplied by the program sponsor or written certification of licensee setting forth all of the following. So this is for service on a technical committee. So if you're on a technical committee for the AICPA or TSCPA, I know in the past TSCPA has been able to offer certificates. I just don't know if AICPA or other groups are able to do that in a technical committee. So I simply took what was in the model rules and gave folks the option of basically self-affirming this by including the items in A, B, and C. So if you all are comfortable with that. Well, you do, what says, hold on, let me go back. I know. Participation, this is how it's defined. Participation and work on a technical committee of an international, national, or state professional association, council, or member organization, or a government entity that supports professional services or industries that require unique and specific knowledge in technical fields. So, yeah, this board, we do have allowed for state ethics for these board meetings in the past. So you can't double dip, really. But, yeah, we've only been giving 1 hour.
It's similar to when we go to the NASBA convention,
Yes.
and
Yes.
because we don't really get a certificate, we get something that says we
get a
attend.
certificate, but it doesn't break anything down.
Okay.
So you get a certificate that you attend, but then you have to affirm what you attended and what type of credit you're getting for it.
This kind of falls under.
Yeah.
Okay.
Last year when when I attended that new member orientation at NASBA,
Yes.
they told us at the front of the meeting to go back to your state board and get them to certify this class because it wasn't lumped in with the rest of the classes or the rest of the meeting.
I think you could probably get this would cover that. Do you think? Yeah.
I didn't do that. I didn't come back and ask you to give me anything, but I qualify. But that's interesting that they told us to go back to our individual boards and get something instead of just them providing us with something.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'm not sure the theory behind that. When they give you a certificate for the rest of the event.
Well, it was kind of a separate.
Yeah.
Only certain people went to it, so.
Yeah. Andy will have that this year, assuming we can get him approved. Okay, and then the last part, well, almost last part. The next page is control and reporting system. This just shows in each of these delivery methods is from model rules, and it's defined how you measure each of these programs. So it clarifies that self-study can be is a minimum of 1/2 credit initially. Group programs are a minimum of 1 full credit. Nano learning is 1/5 of a credit. So it just defines these things that were never in here before, so that it's clear to everyone what's allowed and how you compute that. At the bottom, I made a note there that the model rules suggest that you cannot obtain more than 25% of your hours from in-firm or participation in a technical committee. I did not include this in the provision as we've not had that restriction before. So if you'd like to add that, you can let me know. And the last page is failure to meet the requirements. I, again, just updated technical fields of study there. And in number 3, hopefully I can explain this, but 3 talks about your penalty of 8 CPE hours that would be assessed against a licensee who fails to timely complete at least 20 hours in each year of their renewal. So let's say you're renewing for 17 and 18 and you failed to complete your 20 hours in 17. And it's now 19 when I'm auditing you. I can't make you physically go back in time and make up those 20 hours in 2017. So I'm suggesting that we remove the word additional, because I can't make you complete the 20 plus the 8. Now, you might get worried, oh, does that mean that they'll be less than 80? Well, they have an 80-hour requirement in a different section, so they still have to get their 80. I just can't make you go back and take your 20 in 2017. So I'm suggesting to remove that word. True. So I know that was painful, but those are my recommendations.
So what we need to do, we have 2 suggested changes to what you just went through very quickly. One is to revise the allowance for carryover for new licensees, and the second one is to remove the word directly. Right. And so does this committee make a motion that accept this plus these 2 changes to present to the board for approving a new rule? Is that what?
We don't?
We don't, okay.
Okay. Then we don't, she's saying we don't really need to vote.
Okay.
I've made those notations, and so I guess I would just like to make sure there aren't any other discussions or any other concerns with the rules that anybody would like to discuss.
I feel like we've talked about these a lot.
Okay.
Did you say you're going to take this and do one final edit or whatever and come back at the next meeting with maybe a final proposed draft? And I guess that one we would have to
Yes,
vote
you
on
will
that.
have to vote, and then that would be a proposed rule. So it would, then go, once you approve it, it'll go through the process of becoming a rule. So, yeah, hopefully I don't have to go through that detail next time.
I don't think so.
No, okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, that's all.
Wendy, is there anything else we need to do today? I mean,
No, I think the only thing was that you and I had discussed that I apologize for not having on the agenda that maybe we can get out of the way is the CPE state ethics for attending these meetings. Does the board still want to do that since we've somewhat changed our ethics requirement, or would you just want to get technical credit as outlined in the rule? Do you want to get state-specific ethics?
Exactly what state-specific is.
Right.
I mean,
I thought we should probably revisit. Casey and I talked about revisiting just to be sure that that's still the direction we want to take. And again, and offer anyone who attends the meeting the 1 hour as well.
okay. I'd just like to remind everybody that we need to be as focused and on point and as we can possibly be tomorrow to finish as soon as we can. We've got an agenda, and we'll go through the whole agenda, however long it takes, but the faster we can go, the better. 'Cause we will be tired by the time tomorrow's over, I think, unless something miraculous happens on this hearing that we don't anticipate. Thanks for being here today. We'll reconvene at 8:30 in the morning.
8:30. And I Because we're ordering lunch, we were a little bit less on breakfast in the morning, so we are having. I know. I'm sorry. We're having from Panera Bread in the morning instead of Chick-fil-A. So I'm sorry.
$1 million surplus.
Man.